Chapter 225. There were low slopes on both sides of the mountain path. Trees were overgrown and weeds were growing wildly. When Lu Rui looked over, she saw a mountain rabbit running out of the grass that was half the height of a person. It entered the wild grass on the other side and disappeared in a flash. Thinking back to the scene he had just seen, a figure hiding in the deep grass sighed in his heart. The Lu sisters are actually such peerless beauties. If they were killed by those rough people, wouldn't it be a pity? Even the little servant girls beside them are quite good-looking. Looking at their eyebrows, they are also virgins. They are much better than those ordinary women. The figure secretly sighed in his heart. He had been picking flowers for many years, but he had never seen such a beautiful woman. He couldn't help but start to doubt his life. Why did he meet all those ordinary women? The sound of footsteps gradually faded away. He made up his mind. He couldn't let these beauties be defiled by those people. At the very least, he had to let them first. Just as this thought emerged in his mind, he was suddenly shocked. He slowly raised his head, and when he looked at the mountain path again, he couldn't see a single figure. That trace of shock gradually turned into doubt. Strange. He clearly had a strange feeling just now, as if he had encountered a crisis. It was a moment of life and death, and it made his hair stand on end. But in the next moment, that feeling completely disappeared. If I want to be ahead of them, it looks like I have to make my move tonight. He muttered to himself and stood up from the grass. The weeds could only reach a person's waist, but they didn't reach his neck. At this moment he could clearly see the figure's appearance. He had a fat head and big ears, and he was short. It was an ugly dwarf. "Who are you?" At this moment, a cold voice came from behind him. The dwarf's body froze for a moment, and his expression changed drastically. He fiercely swung his sleeves, and a cloud of pink smoke shot out from his sleeves, spreading in the direction of the voice. At the same time, he skillfully retracted his hands into his sleeves. When he stretched them out again, there were two sharp blades in his hands. He pierced through the smoke and stabbed forward. In the next moment, the smoke rolled back and the dwarf's body flew backward. He spat out blood in the air and fell heavily on the mountain path. "Eldest miss, what's wrong?" Not far ahead, Old Fong had just come out of the stockade village and was about to descend the mountain to take a look around the prefectural city. Halfway there, he saw a figure fly out from the low slope and land at his feet. He raised his head and looked at the young miss who was walking towards him with a dazed expression. In the northern district of the prefectural city of Qing, and many lowly commoners lived there. Bandits and robbers had always run amok. It was one of the few places in the city where evil was hidden. At this moment there were many people gathered in a dark house. Most of them were burly and carried weapons with them. Their bodies exuded a faint murderous aura, which was incomparably terrifying. If an ordinary person accidentally barged in, they would probably be so frightened that they would immediately fall to the ground. "Why isn't that shorty here yet?" A bald man in the middle glanced at the crowd and asked impatiently. Many of them had strange expressions on their faces when they heard this. Other than the boning knife Zhu Tu Fu, there were not many people present who dared to use the term shorty to describe that person. Not only that, even words like short, dwarf, and even short were taboo in front of that person. If they accidentally offended him, they probably wouldn't even know how they died. After all, other than being lustful, that person was also famous for his bad temper in the martial arts world. Once, someone had been brutally killed by him because they had mocked his physique. Even they shuddered when they thought of the tragic scene. Forget it, there's no need to wait for him. That dwarf has probably already died on a woman's belly. Beside the bald man, a middle-aged man with a thin face and a gloomy expression said mockingly. He turned his head to look at the other burly man. "Brother Zhou, was my good-for-nothing brother really captured by that girl surnamed Lu?" The burly man nodded and said in a deep voice, "If Brother Cui doesn't believe me, you can go out and ask around. In the past 2 years, how many of our brothers in the Green Forest have fallen to that woman's hands? Come to think of it, those brothers have no grudge against her, but that woman just won't let them go. She would rather become the minions of the government. My brother, who also fell to her hands. I'm afraid that his head will soon roll to the ground. I say, Brother Zhou, are you a man or not? A woman can actually make you so afraid, and you even need these brothers to come and help." The bald man looked at the burly man with disdain and said, "It's just a woman. Your father will let her win with only one hand." Oh, since you Zhu Tufu look down on women so much, why don't you spar with me? A feminine voice came from the crowd and everyone made way for her. A skinny woman with a scar on her face walked out from the crowd. Zhu Tufu originally wanted to agree, but when he saw that it was this woman who spoke, he immediately swallowed the words he was about to say and said with an embarrassed smile, "The third lady is a heroine among women, so of course she is not one of them. This old Zhu admires you very much, but as for the spar, let's forget about it." If it was any other woman, he would have already taken out his 2 boning knives and charged at her. The infamous Zhu Tufu was not like the shorty, who knew how to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. However, even though the person in front of him was a woman, there was probably not a single person present who treated her as a woman. This woman was abandoned by her fiancé, and on the night of the man's wedding she beheaded the newlyweds in front of all their friends and relatives. She swore to kill all the unfaithful men in the world. Over the years, the number of men who died by her hands was not small. Even someone as fierce as Zhu Tufu felt a little scared when he saw her. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, the burly man laughed and said, "We are all brothers, so let's not hurt each other. I'm sure that since everyone is here, they all have some grudges against that woman. What we should do now is what we need to discuss." What's there to discuss? There are so many of us. Even if that woman is a grandmaster, she will die on the spot. Senior Han's only son has also been captured by that woman and handed over to the authorities. Senior has already said that whoever can take that woman's head will be accepted by Senior Han as his disciple. This is a rare opportunity. Also, Minister Zhao of Chuzhou has also said that whoever can capture that woman will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver. Hearing the angry chatter of the crowd, even the instigator of this matter, the burly man, did not expect this. He had only spread the news to gather some people who had a grudge against that woman to act together to increase their chances of success, but he did not expect so many people to respond. That woman had offended almost half of the heroes in the Jianghu near Qing'an Prefecture. Chapter 226. Just thinking about it, if these people's target was him, the burly man felt a chill run down his spine. That was practically a death sentence. That Senior Han had become famous 20 years ago. At that time his martial arts were already top-notch. Now he was probably even more unfathomable. Even if he hadn't stepped into the Grandmaster realm, he wasn't far from it. If one could become his disciple and receive his guidance, their martial arts cultivation would definitely improve. Regardless of whether or not they had any grudges with that woman, just this one condition was enough to make countless people scramble like ducks. Zhao Yuanwei could be considered half a person of Jianghu. His family was extremely wealthy, and there weren't many people who would sit still for 1,000 taels of silver to buy that woman. He had originally only wanted to gather some people to avenge his brother, but now that things had developed to this point, it had long since gotten out of his control. At this point, apart from his group of people who knew how many people were eyeing that woman, with such a large commotion, it was impossible to hide from the authorities. Those who could accept this kind of transaction or who had a grudge with that woman were definitely not clean. If this dragged on for too long, it wouldn't be a good thing for them. I have to make my move as soon as possible to avoid long nights of dreams. In an instant, the burly man had already made his decision. On the mountain path, Fong grabbed the midget's collar and lifted him up, fiercely asking, "Speak. What kind of evil plan do you have? Who sent you?" After experiencing the matter of the young master being kidnapped last time, Fong hated this kind of person to the extreme. This guy was lying in ambush on the side of the road. He definitely wanted to harm the young master. If it wasn't for the young miss, the young master might have really fallen into this guy's trap. Since I've fallen into your hands, if you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please." The midget glanced at Fong and coldly snorted. He had an illustrious reputation in Jianghu. These years he had done all sorts of evil deeds. Naturally, he would think of what would happen if he fell into the hands of the authorities. They were all hot-blooded men. Even if their heads fell off, they would still be heroes in their next life. You do have some guts. Upon hearing this, Fong didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and turned to look at Lu Rui. "Eldest miss, leave this matter to me. I want to see how long this guy can keep his mouth shut." He sneered at the dwarf, grabbed him by the neck and walked deeper into the bushes. Some time ago he had learned many tricks in the yamen. Unfortunately, he had never had the chance to try them out. This time the shorty was really lucky. Of course, that kind of brutal and bloody scene could not be seen by the eldest Mississippi. Soon enough, the dwarf's voice came from the depths of the bushes. Bah! If you have any tricks up your sleeves, just use them. If I shout, I'll call you Grandpa. Grandpa, spare me. I'll tell you everything. After a while, Fong carried the unconscious dwarf out of the bushes and casually threw him on the ground. His expression was terrifyingly gloomy. Young miss. He threw the midget down and looked at Lu Rui. He opened his mouth and only spoke after a long time. This is bad. As he walked on the streets of the prefectural city, Li Yi noticed that there were more bailiffs patrolling the streets than usual. It seemed that every district had increased their manpower. These bailiffs naturally recognized him. They came over and greeted him respectfully. Magistrate. They looked a little tired. Did something big happen in the prefectural city these 2 days? Li Yi looked at one of the bailiffs and asked in confusion. The bailiff immediately replied, Your Excellency, I'm not too sure either. It's just that the higher-ups have ordered us to be on guard for the next few days. After asking a few more questions, Li Yi did not get any answers. He waved his hand and signaled for the bailiffs to continue patrolling. He was still on sick leave and could not be bothered with so many things. He believed that Her Highness would take care of these matters. Out of the way, out of the way. Just as the three of them were about to reach the entrance of Rui Lane, there was a sudden commotion on the street in front of them. A man ran over recklessly. Li Yi took a closer look. This man was the one who was arrested and sent to the Yamen for injuring someone. He was later released because of his filial piety. His name seemed to be Wu Er. Wu Er was carrying another person on his back, and the bailiff uniform he was wearing was stained with blood. Li Yi was stunned for a moment, but that Wu Er had already rushed past him and ran straight into the Huichun Hall not far away. Rui, bring Xiaohuan back first. I'll go take a look. Li Yi did not see clearly who was wearing the bailiff uniform, but he was sure that it was his subordinate. He frowned and informed Rui before quickly walking over. Lu Rui and Xiaohuan did not return to Rui Lane. They watched as he hurriedly left and followed. When Li Yi arrived at Huichun Hall, other than Wu Er, the 2 bailiffs who were patrolling earlier were also inside. Dainyu, what happened to you? Looking at Dainyu, who was lying on the ground with a pale face and a few wounds that were still bleeding, the expressions on the 2 men's faces were both shocked and angry. Let's not talk about this first. Wu Er quickly replied. Treating the wounds is more important. No, there are too many wounds on his body. We can't stop the bleeding. Dr. Chen's face was full of anxiety. He had already poured different kinds of hemostatic medicine on the wounds, but the man was still bleeding. If this continued, it would not be long before he lost a lot of blood. Even the gods could not save him. Li Yi had just walked into Huichun Hall and happened to hear Dr. Chen's words. Just as he was about to quickly walk over, a figure behind him was faster than him. In the blink of an eye, the figure appeared beside Daniel and reached out to poke him twice. You. Dr. Chen was shocked when he saw the woman who suddenly appeared and randomly poked the patient's body. He was about to reprimand her when his eyes suddenly widened and he swallowed his words. At this moment, on the man lying on the ground, the bleeding wounds had stopped. Although there were still traces of blood seeping out, it was much better than before. I can at most seal his acupuncture points for 15 minutes. You better think of a way to save him during this time. Lu Rui stood up and said to Dr. Chen. I can only apply some hemostatic medicine and bandage his wound. As for whether he can survive, it will depend on his luck. Dr. Chen said honestly. When Li Yi heard this, he immediately ordered the servant girl beside him, Xiaohuan, go to the shop and bring my small medicine box over. The servant girl knew that the situation was urgent. She responded and quickly ran out. Am I going to die? Dainyu, who had already woken up, said with a trembling voice. A trace of despair appeared on his face. When he heard Dr. Chen's words, the constable next to him revealed a sorrowful expression. He bent down and held Dainyu's hand tightly. He said, Brother Dainyu, don't worry. If you die, I will take care of Auntie until she dies. Good brother. Dainyu's face revealed a grateful expression. Don't worry about my nephew. I will take care of him until he grows up. The constable continued. The area that Dainyu was patrolling today should have been him. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to be closer to home and swap places with Dainyu, he would have been the one lying here, As for sister-in-law, I will help you take good care of her. Brother Danny, you can go in peace. The constable's heart was filled with sorrow and he held Daniel's hand even tighter. Daniel's pale face suddenly changed. He turned and grabbed Dr. Chen's arm and said with a trembling voice, "Doctor, save me. I don't want to die." Chapter 227. Dr. Chen had a helpless look on his face. If it was any other injury it would be fine. However, this kind of bleeding wound was the most difficult to deal with. He could only do his best. Even on the battlefield, this kind of minor injury would only be treated with a simple bandage. If the injury was too serious, he could only add a knife to help the patient. Daniel looked at Dr. Chen's expression and suddenly had a bad premonition from the bottom of his heart. Why could he faintly feel the same aura from this old doctor as the bald man with the bone-paring knife? It was as if the bald man would stab him a few times in the next moment. "Young master, the medicine box is here." Xiao Huan ran in with a wooden box panting and handed it to Li Yi. The servant girl knew what was in the box. Other than some commonly used medicine, there was wine and needles. However, she had never seen the young master use them before. "Wait." Seeing that Dr. Chen was about to pour the unknown powder on Daniel's wound, Li Yi quickly walked over. "County Lieutenant." Dr. Chen turned around and looked at him with a face full of doubt. This man's injury could not be delayed any longer. Li Yi opened the wooden box and took out the things inside. He said, "Let me deal with the wound." Dr. Chen looked doubtful. Although this county magistrate Li knew Lord Lu, even if Lord Lu came here personally, he wouldn't be able to cure this kind of injury. Where did this young magistrate's confidence come from? "Lord." Daniel was stunned for a moment and said hesitantly. This old doctor looked a little unreliable, but in terms of medical skills he should be better than the county lieutenant, right? "Do you trust me?" Li Yi looked up at Daniel and asked. Daniel and Li Yi looked at each other. It was as if he saw the county lieutenant who was full of vigor in the court again. Daniel's heart calmed down a little. He gritted his teeth and said, "I trust you." Seeing that the injured person also said so, Dr. Chen did not say anything else. Even if he dealt with it himself, he only had less than 50% confidence. Since the county lieutenant was willing to take this risk, he was happy to do it. "Might hurt a little. Bear with it." Li Yi took out a small bottle of disinfectant. The wound on Daniel's body needed to be stitched up. In order to prevent the wound from getting infected, he had to disinfect it before stitching it up. As if he was trying his best to stay awake, Daniel smiled and said, Daniel don't have any other abilities, but I can still endure this pain." Roar. Li Yi used a clean cloth that had been boiled and dipped in alcohol to help him clean the area around the wound. The moment he touched the wound, Daniel screamed. In later generations, iodophor was commonly used to disinfect because alcohol was too stimulating to the human body. Ordinary people could not tolerate it. That feeling might be even more stimulating than directly sprinkling salt on the wound. Li Yi glanced at him and continued what he was doing. If it wasn't for Daniel's powerful knockout drug, he might not even have the chance to stand here. This time he had a chance to repay him. His roar. When Li Yi was disinfecting his wound, Daniel did not look like a seriously injured person at all. He was full of energy and kept screaming. After a while, Li Yi finally stopped what he was doing. He turned to look at Lu Rui and asked, "Is there any way to make him calm down temporarily?" He was also a person who cared about his reputation. If this guy kept screaming while lying on the ground, people who did not know better would think that he did something to him. Yes. Lu Rui's answer was very straightforward. She chopped the back of Daniel's head with her hand, and the world finally became quiet. Dr. Chen and the two constables who were supporting Daniel saw this, and their mouths twitched at the same time. As expected of Mississippi Lu, this trick was very effective. Not only did Daniel stop screaming when he disinfected the wound with alcohol, even when he started to stitch the wound with catgut, Daniel seemed to be asleep and did not have any reaction. Except for Li Yi, everyone had a reaction. Xiao Huan did not know what the needles and thread in the box were used for before, but now she knew. Seeing her son-in-law stitch the man's wound as if he was sewing clothes, her face was already pale with fear. She covered her eyes and did not dare to watch anymore. As for the apprentice in the medical center who was not mentally strong enough, he ran to the backyard when Li Yi stitched the first stitch. He leaned against the wall and vomited. The scene just now had a huge impact on him. He would not be able to have any good dreams for the next few nights. The man who carried Daniel here, Wu Er, also felt his stomach churn when he saw this. Looking at the county magistrate who continued to stitch the wound calmly, the expression in his eyes immediately changed. Dr. Chen had been a doctor for decades, and the two constables had seen some big scenes because of their profession. Naturally, they would not be so embarrassed, but their expressions were still not normal. County magistrate, this. Dr. Chen, who had never seen such a method, swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He did not dare to stop it, so he spoke with a trembling voice. Just as he said a few words, Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Be quiet, don't talk, I'll take responsibility if anything happens." He was fully focused at this moment, and with the help of the library in his mind, he could ensure that his hands would not make any mistakes. Any external interference would have a significant impact on him. Lu Rui stood beside him and watched as the wound was stitched up. She clenched her fists tightly and her face was slightly pale, but she did not look away. After the wound was stitched up, Li Yi took out the sterilized gauze from the box and bandaged Daniel's wound before standing up. Dr. Chen should know what to do next. A quarter of an hour had already passed, but there was no more blood flowing out of the stitched wound. Dr. Chen's face revealed a shocked expression. At this moment he finally understood why the imperial physician, Lord Lu, was so polite to this young county officer. This was a method of stitching wounds that he had never seen before. If all the doctors in the world could learn it, countless lives would be saved, especially on the battlefield, and countless soldiers would benefit from it. Dr. Chen did not dare to think about it. The next moment his face turned solemn and he solemnly bowed to Li Yi and said, "May I be so bold as to ask County Magistrate to spread this method to the world? The people of the Jing Kingdom will remember your kindness for generations to come." The doctors in this era, regardless of their medical skills, all had noble sentiments. They always thought about the people. Imperial physician Lu was like that, and now Dr. Chen was also like that. Li Yi waved his hand. This matter was not urgent. He had to find out how Daniel got injured first. This was in Qing, an prefectural city, and someone actually dared to attack a constable. In the future it would be a felony of assaulting a police officer. It was obvious that the person did not respect the county magistrate. When he raised his hand he found that it was blood red. He did not have sterile gloves and he only sterilized it. When he stitched up the wound there was naturally a lot of blood on it. When he was concentrating he did not notice anything. Now that he came back to his senses, he saw that both of his hands were bloody, and a smell of blood hit his face. Li Yi suddenly felt his stomach churning and his head became dizzy. "What's wrong with you?" Lu Rui was the first to notice his abnormality. Just as he opened his mouth he saw Dr. Chen's body shake a few times and he fell straight back. Chapter 228. After the wound was stitched up, Daniel, who was no longer in any danger, was temporarily placed in the medical center. Lu Rui's hand chop was not light. Half an hour had passed but he still had not woken up. No matter what, Daniel was finally out of danger. Before Li Yi could open his mouth to ask, the constable who was on good terms with Daniel looked at Wu Er and asked, "Who hurt Daniel? Where is the murderer now?" Daniel was injured because of him, so he naturally could not ignore this matter. Dr. Chen brought a basin of clean water, and Li Yi asked Xiao Huan to fetch a piece of soap from the shop to wash the blood on his hands. When Wu Er spoke he raised his head and listened. "It was bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu," Wu Er said. "What Tufu?" The two bailiffs had clearly not heard of this name, and a trace of confusion appeared on their faces. The two were not people of Jianghu, so it was normal that they had not heard of Zhu Tufu. Wu Er was not surprised and explained, "Zhu Tufu is a famous villain in the underworld and he has a bad reputation in the underworld." He dared not say that in the entire Jianghu, but in the territory of Qing'an Prefecture, there were not many people in Jianghu who did not know of bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu. What bone-paring knife or butcher knife? This nickname is too ugly. As Li Yi was thinking about this, he noticed that when Wu Er mentioned Zhu Tufu, the corner of Lu Rui's mouth twitched. He wiped his hands clean, stood up and asked Lu Rui, "You or that Zhu Tufu who is more powerful?" Lu Rui looked at him indifferently and did not speak, as if he did not care to answer. Li Yi suddenly understood. Compared to his sister-in-law, that Zhu Tufu was far from enough. The bailiff who spoke just now gritted his teeth and said, "Who cares about him? Daniel has no grudge against him, but he was so ruthless. Where's he now? I will go back to the government office and call a few more brothers. We must arrest him. Absolutely not. Hearing this, Wu Er waved his hand and said that Zhu Tufu is one of the top experts in the Green Forest. He came to Qing and to take the life of the woman from the willow leaf stockade. He has gathered a large group of Green Forest experts around him. You must not act rashly. Wu Er himself could be considered half a man of Jianghu, so he knew very well how powerful those people were when they gathered together. Not to mention a few constables, even all the local government laborers would not be a match for them. The only reason that the injured constable was still alive was probably because Zhu Tufu had some misgivings and did not dare to kill anyone in the prefectural city. Even so, if it were not for the fact that he happened to see the constable named Dainiu when those people left, he would have lost his life due to excessive blood loss. Wu Er, who was busy stopping the two bailiffs, didn't notice that after he said those words, the beautiful woman and the county lieutenant's expressions turned extremely unsightly. What did you say? Lu Rui flashed and appeared in front of Wu Er. She stared at him and asked, "What woman from the Willow Leaf village?" Wu Er was stunned for a moment and did not know what was going on. Could it be that this young lady also had a grudge against that woman? At this moment there was no time for him to think too much. Li Yi had already walked over with quick steps and said with a serious face, "What do you know about this matter? Tell me everything." Okay. Wu Er was very grateful to the county lieutenant who he was indebted to. After a moment of daze, he organized his thoughts and told him everything he knew regardless of whether it was important or not. The county lieutenant has just been in office, so you may not know, but in the past 2 years, many people from the underworld who were wanted by the government have been captured in Qing Prefecture. Wu Er had 2 brothers in his family. The elder brother was somewhat skilled in martial arts and had traveled the martial world for many people. Naturally, he knew some things about Jianghu. When he came back this time, he talked with Wu Er about some things. After capturing so many people from the underworld, the woman must have offended many people. Senior Han is a famous martial artist and only has 1 son. Because he committed a murder, he is also wanted by the government. After he escaped to Qing Prefecture, he was captured by the woman and handed over to the government. This time, Senior Han spread the word that if anyone could take the woman's head, he would take that person as his disciple. Also, Officer Zhao of Chuzhou, although I don't know what kind of grudge he has with the woman, he also put 1,000 taels of silver on his head. Listening to Wu Er's story, Lu Rui's face gradually darkened. She knew very well what her sister had done in the past 2 years. If it wasn't for capturing these wanted criminals and exchanging them for money and food, the family would have run out of food a long time ago. They wouldn't have been able to survive until she kidnapped Li Yi. In the past 2 years, her sister would often go out for a few days. When she came back, she would occasionally have some scars on her body. She would keep some of the rice and food she received from the government and distribute most of it to the family. If it wasn't for this, who knew how many people would have died during the 2 years of famine? And the thing that she had been worried about had finally happened. How many people are there? Li Yi looked at Wu Er and asked in a low voice. Wu Er thought for a moment and said, with Bone-Paring Knife, Zhu Tufu and Death Rush, Cui Yan as the leaders, the number of people from the underworld is the highest. There are about 30 of them. Although Senior Han and Officer Zhao also attracted many people, most of them acted alone. Although there are more people, I heard that the woman is very skilled in martial arts and is much less of a threat than the former. In the end, Wu Er had only heard about it. This was all that his brother had revealed to him. Senior Han, Officer Zhao, are these the so-called heroes of the martial arts world? Li Yi said in a low voice. When he turned around to look, Lu Rui had disappeared without him noticing. Wu Er snorted and said, although Zhu Tufu and Cui Yan are skilled in martial arts, they are not heroes. In the eyes of true heroes of the martial arts world, they are just a group of powerful bandits. Although Senior Han loves his son, he can't distinguish between good and evil. I'm afraid that in the future he will be laughed at by countless people. As for Officer Zhao, I heard that he has always been in close contact with these people. I don't know how many dirty tricks he used to build up his family business today. Wu Er's face was full of resentment and his words were full of disdain for these people. However, Li Yi was no longer concerned about these things. Li Yi turned around and patted the constable's shoulder as he said, Wei Chong, please take this lady to the county government office. I'll leave her safety in your hands. Don't worry, my lord. I will definitely protect this young lady. The constable named Wei Chong immediately bowed and said, Young master, I. Xiao Huan opened her mouth with a pale face. Li Yi touched her head and said with a smile, Be good and listen to the young master. Stay in the government office and don't run around. I will come to pick you up after I finish this matter. I'll be counting on you. Li Yi glanced at the constable again before turning around and leaving. Young master. Xiao Huan anxiously wanted to chase after him, but the constable was already in front of her. Constable Wei touched his nose and said with a bitter smile, Young lady, please listen to the county lieutenant and follow me back to the government office. Lao Si, you can't die. If you die like this, how are we going to live? In the Willow Leaf village, a woman in coarse clothes knelt on the ground and wailed. In front of her, a middle-aged man was lying on the ground. His face was pale and there was a trace of blood on the clothes on his chest. The 7 or 8-year-old naughty boy stood there in a daze. He didn't know what to do with the scene in front of him. After the woman pinched his thigh, he immediately shriveled up and wailed. Seeing this, the onlookers looked at each other. They had just arrived when they heard the noise and didn't know what had happened. Fourth aunt, fourth uncle is only slightly injured. He won't die. Lu Rui lowered her head and said to her, If it weren't for you, would Lao Si be beaten up like this? It would have been better if Lu Rui hadn't opened her mouth. The moment she opened her mouth, the woman immediately glared at her and said, You have offended those Jianghu people. Now they want to kill you. Even fourth sister has suffered an unexpected calamity. Those people kill without batting an eye. When the time comes, even we will be buried with you. We won't be able to live on anymore. Not long after the woman finished speaking, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Lao Si's wife, what did you say? What Jianghu people? What is all this fighting and killing? Say something. Lao Si's wife's words were very frightening. What did she mean by kill and be buried with you? People who didn't know the inside story trembled and urged her. You can ask her. The woman stretched out her finger and pointed at Lu Rui, saying, She just had to provoke those murderous geniuses. Great, now she's dragging our entire stronghold down with her. If it wasn't for the fact that fourth brother's hands and feet were injured and he still had some martial arts left, I'm afraid he would have abandoned us mother and son to die first. In any case, I can't stay in this stronghold anymore. You can stay if you want, but don't blame me for not warning you. The woman helped the middle-aged man up from the ground and walked back to their house. Before they left, she even kicked the naughty child beside her and scolded, What are you waiting for? Go home and pack your things to escape. Lao Si's wife's words became more and more terrifying. Everyone was shocked and suspicious. After glancing at Lu Rui, they hurriedly chased after Lao Si's family. Lao Si's family, don't be anxious. Speak clearly. That's right. Don't scare us. What exactly happened? Tell us. We'll think of a solution together. Eldest young mistress. Fong turned to look at Lu Rui. He wanted to say something but stopped. Lu Rui's expression did not change. She looked at Lao Si's wife, who was spitting saliva everywhere. She looked away and said, Uncle Fong, let Lao Si and Juzi go down the mountain today. Find a place to rest in the prefectural city. I'll help you settle down in the prefectural city in 2 days. Don't go back to the village. Eldest young mistress, what do you mean? Fong frowned and said, Aren't they just a few scums? If one comes, Fong will kill one. If 2 come, I'll kill both. What's there to be afraid of? Sister. As soon as Fong finished speaking, a white figure dashed over from afar. Lu Rui's pretty face was covered in frost, and her body emitted a faint murderous intent. Rui, you say, how did you provoke these people? After a while, the Lu family members who learned the whole thing from Lao Si's wife all gathered in the small courtyard. A middle-aged man opened his mouth and sighed. His voice was full of resentment. What should we do? How can we fight against those heroes of the underworld? Rui, you've brought disaster upon us. Another middle-aged woman looked at Lu Rui and said with a pale face. Rui had captured a lot of Lulan village tyrants and handed them over to the government, but she had also offended those people. The Willow Leaf village would not have peace in the future. Their peaceful life for dozens of years naturally could not continue. Of course, although they complained, no one dared to say a few harsh words. After all, they knew the temperament of the 2 sisters. If they really got serious, none of them would be able to stop them. We can't fight against those people. I'm afraid we can't live in the village anymore. A man sighed. Everyone agreed. This was also the result of their discussion just now. Although they were born and grew up here, nothing was more important than their own lives. Those people's target was only Rui. If they left the village, they would not go so far as to let them go. Moreover, they didn't feel anything before. But since the candied Ha's business became profitable, their lives became comfortable. They gradually felt that living in the village was really inconvenient. Many of them had long thought of moving out. This incident was just a prelude. With their current net worth, they could live comfortably anywhere they wanted. They could find a new place to start their candied Ha's business, and they wouldn't have to pay the joining fee anymore. Wouldn't that be much better than their current lives? But they would not be willing to leave like this. A woman pushed the old man who was lying on a rocking chair in the courtyard and said, "Second uncle, say something." The old man who was napping was shaken awake by her. His eyes were half open and he said, "What did you say?" "Second uncle, you're an elder. You should also say your opinion on this matter." The woman said again. A confused look appeared on the old man's face. He said, "You want me to eat?" "No, I don't want to eat. I just ate at third brother's house." After saying that, he turned over in the rocking chair and changed into a more comfortable position. He continued to nap. Just as the woman was about to speak, a voice was heard. Lu Rui looked at them and said, "This matter Rui has indeed caused trouble for everyone. If any uncle wants to leave, as long as you let me know, you can get 10 taels of silver from me as a settlement fee." The people of the Lu family smiled. They had been waiting for this for a long time. "This is so embarrassing." Fourth aunt, who had just reprimanded her, smiled. "In that case, thank you, Rui. Count me in." We were also forced to do this. I hope Rui won't blame us." Everyone spoke up one after another. Every family who wanted to leave received 10 taels of silver and happily went back to pack up their belongings, planning to leave as soon as possible. 10 taels of silver as a settlement fee was undoubtedly a huge sum of money for them. It was enough for them to settle anywhere outside the prefectural city. Lu Rui's expression was cold as she looked at everything coldly. Lu Rui, on the other hand, looked at them with a smile. From today onwards, she really had nothing to do with these nominal uncles. Chapter 229. Li Yi urged the worker to speed up the whole way, and they arrived at the foot of Green Willow Mountain in half the usual time. Without any delay, they arrived at the stronghold without any incident. Before they entered the stronghold, a few people walked towards them. Li Yi easily recognized that it was 7th Uncle Lu's family. When they first wanted to enter the candied hawthorn business, he was one of the first to speak up. At this moment, this family was full of bags of various sizes, and even the 2 brats were no exception. When they saw Li Yi at the entrance of the stronghold, 7th Uncle Lu and his wife froze for a moment. The expressions on their faces became strange. They didn't greet him and walked straight past Li Yi. The 2 brats stopped in their tracks and raised their heads to look at him. They called out in a low voice, "Mister," and turned to chase after their parents. Li Yi stood where he was and looked into the stronghold. A few blurry figures carrying luggage walked towards him. Among these people there were members of the Lu clan and there were also ordinary villagers. The way they looked at him could be described as strange. More people brushed past him without saying a word. Occasionally, some people would come up to him and clasp their hands in thanks. For those villagers who didn't even have land, 10 taels of silver was enough for their entire family to spend for 2 years if they were frugal. Although Rui was only the head of the stronghold in name, and they had never acknowledged her in their hearts, from this point, it could be seen that she treated them well. These people didn't hold any resentment in their hearts, but they were more or less reluctant to leave the place where they had lived for so long. He didn't know if it was Li Yi's imagination, but when he walked through the stronghold he felt that it was much more spacious than before. It wasn't until he reached the front door of his house that he heard a rough voice coming from inside. "Eldest miss, what are you saying?" "I'm not leaving. I won't leave no matter what. I've lived for so long, how can I be afraid of these little thieves?" This was Fang's voice. Another voice followed. "Hee hee, young miss, we all know where the food you gave us for the past 2 years came from. If we leave now, are we still human?" After this voice was heard, several voices in the courtyard immediately echoed it. Bullsh*t. Do you really think we're pushovers? We'll listen to Fong this time. We won't leave. When Li Yi pushed the door open and walked in, everyone turned to look at him. Lu Rui was stunned. The next moment she quickly walked over and asked, "Husband, why are you back?" Li Yi looked at her and said, "Everyone follow me back to the prefectural city. No matter how bold they are, they won't dare to act wildly in the city." There were more than 1,000 guards in the prefectural city. As long as those people appeared in large numbers, the government would not ignore them. If those people dared to make a move in the prefectural city, they would not be able to escape even if they had wings. But here they did not have to worry so much. "Husband, you know all about it?" Lu Rui looked at him and asked. Li Yi looked at her. Was she planning to hide such a big thing from him? Lu Rui smiled and said, "What will come will come. Don't worry, husband. Actually, I'm very skilled in martial arts. Those people are nothing to be afraid of." Lu Rui knew better than anyone else about the methods of the people in the forest. If she did not teach them an unforgettable lesson, she was afraid that there would be endless trouble in the future. She could be a thief for 1,000 days, but she could not guard against thieves for 1,000 days. Although she was not afraid of them, it was hard to guarantee that they would not attack from other areas. She turned around and pointed at a few people including Fong and said, "Uncle Fong, you go back to the city with the son-in-law first. I'm enough here." No. Although Rui was skilled in martial arts, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Wu Er said that there were dozens of them. Li Yi could not let her stay here no matter what. However, just as he was about to object, he suddenly felt a sharp pain at the back of his neck. In the next moment, dizziness and darkness came over him. "Husband, I'm sorry." He saw Lu Rui take back her hand and hold him up. She looked at him apologetically, opened her mouth and then lost consciousness. "Uncle Fong, I'll leave the son-in-law to you." Looking at first Miss and then at the fainted son-in-law, Fong finally nodded helplessly. When Li Yi woke up, he felt that the whole world was shaking. He opened his eyes and the ground below him was moving backward rapidly. This posture was very familiar and the feeling was very familiar. The horse under him was even more familiar. "Stop!" Li Yi shouted. Fong, who was in front of him, pulled the reins and the horse gradually stopped. Fong kindly reminded him, "Son-in-law, don't think about going back. First Miss will knock you out again. I'm afraid it won't be so easy for you to wake up the second time." Fong's words were very reasonable. Although she had a gentle temperament, it was not easy to change her mind once she had decided on something. At least Li Yi could not change her mind. He would settle the score with her after this matter was over. The most important thing was how to get through the current crisis. Li Yi sat up straight on the horse and urged, "Go to the prefectural city." After entering the prefectural city, Li Yi did not return to Rui workshop. Instead, he and Fong went straight in the direction of Prince Ning's mansion. Now he could only rely on Li Xian's power. The bailiffs and bailiffs of the county government were not enough in front of those people. The guards of Prince Ning's mansion were all skilled and there were many of them. If he could borrow some, it would be a great hindrance to those people. "Young master, please wait here for a moment. I will immediately go and inform the crown prince." The servants of Prince Ning's mansion had a very good memory. Last time at the Wang Fei's birthday banquet, housekeeper Wang was very polite to this young master. Of course, he didn't dare to slight him now. He politely had Li Yi wait here and quickly ran in. "Son-in-law, is that pretty boy really the young prince?" Fong had long known the identity of Li Xian, but he still couldn't connect that unreliable pretty boy with the crown prince of Prince Ning. "That's right." Li Yi nodded his head. After receiving confirmation from Li Yi, Fong's worried heart finally relaxed. He didn't know how strong the power of the Prince Ning's mansion was, but the guards that he was familiar with were not just for show. If there were a few more of these people, he would have more confidence in dealing with the motley crowd. "Apologies, the young prince is not here." The servant went in quickly and came out quickly. He spoke apologetically to Li Yi. "Not here." Li Yi furrowed his brow and said, "Please help me inform the crown prince that I want to see the crown prince." Li Yi had never interacted with Prince Ning before. If he hadn't encountered a situation like today, he probably wouldn't have gone to see the crown prince of his own accord. But at this moment he couldn't care so much. The servant still had a smile on his face and said, "Young master, my apologies, but the crown prince is also not in the fu." The expression on Li Yi's face froze and he seemed to understand something. He turned to look at Fong and said, Let's go. Go where? Fong was puzzled. He hadn't even seen the person he was supposed to see. Why was the son-in-law leaving? The medicine shop. Why are we going to the medicine shop? Fong was even more puzzled. To buy some arsenic. If we can't beat them to avoid being humiliated, it's better to take some medicine and commit suicide. Seeing Li Yi and old Fong's silhouettes disappear from afar, the servant looked around and returned to the prince's mansion. He passed through several long corridors and knocked on the door of a certain building. After getting a response, he pushed the door open and walked in. Your Highness, they have been sent away. I know. You can leave now. A voice came from the table in the middle of the room. The servant bowed respectfully and slowly retreated. Both His Majesty and the princess seemed to value this boy. The crown prince also has a close relationship with him. Your Highness, why? An old voice came from the corner. Before the words could finish, Prince Ning waved his hand and interrupted. Thinking of Li Xian's recent changes, Prince Ning frowned and said, he does have some crooked talents, but he can't show them in public. If Xian hangs out with him all day, I'm afraid the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. After Prince Ning spoke, there was no more sound from the corner of the study. Chapter 230. You guys come here, come here. Stop looking, I'm talking to you guys. What's in this bucket? Qing and prefectural cities north, south, east and west city gates. These 2 days the checks on people going in and out were much more detailed than usual. When a few men in rough clothing pushed a large cart out of the city, a knife-wielding guard walked over and asked aloud. The man pushing the cart smiled, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. He said, Hee, it's filled with feces. We were planning to take it outside the city and pour it out. Sir, do you want to open it and take a look? Feces? When the guard heard this, he immediately covered his nose and took a closer look. The wooden barrel was filled with black filth. Even though he covered his nose, he could still smell the stench. Hey, is there a problem? If there's no problem, then hurry up and let them go. Sinks. After the cart stopped here, the stench quickly spread in all directions. Another guard, who was slightly further away, frowned and said loudly, forget it, you guys should hurry up and leave. The guard covered his nose with one hand and waved the other as if he were shooing away flies. Although the higher-ups had requested for a detailed check, there were countless people entering and exiting the city every day. They wouldn't look closely at something like this. Thank you, sir. The man laughed and pushed the cart out. The people beside him naturally followed. Not long after, a group of porters and travelers followed them out of the city gates. After less than an hour, figures gradually gathered in a temple in the mountains far from the prefectural city. Brother Zhu was too rash just now. He really shouldn't have attacked that bailiff. Otherwise, we wouldn't have left the city in such a hurry. The brawny man surnamed Zhou looked at the bald man and shook his head. Zhu Tufu grinned. Brother Zhou's courage is a bit too small. Isn't it just a bailiff? To be honest, I can't even count the number of bailiffs I've killed over the years with one hand. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have had to leave the city so early. The thin woman with a scar on her face snorted coldly. Seeing that the woman who spoke was the third lady, Zhu Tufu didn't argue with her. He turned around and asked the sturdy man, Brother Zhou, have you figured out that place yet? Why don't we kill our way there now and take that woman's head? After that, everyone can go their separate ways. Among the crowd there were obviously quite a few people who saw Zhu Tufu as their leader. When they heard him speak, they all chimed in. Directly or indirectly, they all had some enmity with that woman. They heard that her martial arts skill was very high, but with so many of them, there was no need to be afraid of her. That woman lives in the Willow Leaf village. She can't run away. But it's broad daylight and there are so many of us. I'm afraid we'll attract too much attention. Let's wait patiently. We'll act when it's dark. The sturdy man thought for a while and said, that woman is really hateful. My brother's death can finally be avenged. Whoever obtains her head can go to Senior Han and claim credit for it. If Senior Han takes you in as a disciple, your martial cultivation will definitely improve. I'm more interested in Squire Zhao's reward. In the dilapidated temple on the mountain, there were many figures and the low murmur seemed to be a little noisy. Big brother will be able to avenge Ahu's death soon. Next to the sturdy man surnamed Zhou, a few men gathered there. Their faces were full of joy. The sturdy man looked around the dilapidated temple. Zhu Tufu, death-scurrying ghost, the third lady and evil Manning. Although the midget didn't come, these 4 people along with him and a few of his brothers should be enough to deal with Lu Rui. If she had helpers by her side, the remaining dozens of people should be able to deal with her. Moreover, with Senior Han and Squire Zhao's invitation, who knew how many people were secretly watching her? If she didn't break through to the Grandmaster realm in such a short time, then she could only wait to die. Even if she really did break through, how could that be possible? Raising his head to look outside, the sturdy man surnamed Zhou clenched his fists. Looking at the sky, it would be night in a few hours. What are you doing here? In an exquisite courtyard in the prefectural city, Li Emingzu was dressed in a tight outfit. The constable's waist saber seemed to have turned into a white chain in her hands. From time to time, the sound of air tearing could be heard from the courtyard. It's too boring in the prince's mansion. Originally, I wanted to go to Rui workshop to look for Li Yi, but he's not here, so I can only come here. Li Xian squatted on the ground not far away and used a branch to write and draw on the ground. They were all strange patterns. As he drew, he muttered to himself, I've solved the problem that he taught me to make things difficult for Teacher Chen. I only needed to turn 2 unknowns into 3, but after several days of calculation this problem actually has 4 different answers. The old woman with white hair and a face full of wrinkles stood in the corridor. She didn't understand what the crown prince was talking about, and her eyes were fixed on the saber-wielding woman in the courtyard. Ever since that day, the amount of time the princess spent practicing martial arts every day had increased. Since she was young, she had been very competitive and wanted to do her best at everything. That day in Rui workshop, she had probably been stimulated by that woman. A young man walked over from afar. Seeing the situation in the courtyard, he quietly stood to the side. When the princess stopped, he quickly walked forward and bowed respectfully. He said, I have already investigated the strange movements of the people in the Lulan forest these 2 days are because of a woman called Lu Rui. That woman has helped the government capture many wanted criminals these 2 years and has offended the people in the Lulan forest. I'm afraid that those people will act tonight. Qing'anfu was not the capital. Even if he was following the princess' orders, it was not so easy to investigate some things. After investigating today, he spent some time organizing and told the whole story. Lu Rui? Mingzhu's brow furrowed slightly. She felt that she had heard this name somewhere before. The sky was dark and the drawings on the ground could not be seen clearly. Li Xian threw down the branch in his hand and walked over. He said, What did you say just now, Lu Rui, Li Yi's wife? What happened? Emingzu finally remembered where she had heard this name and her pretty face changed slightly. What? Not long after, Li Xian's mouth opened wide and his face darkened. A moment later, a dozen or so figures rushed out of the courtyard. At the same time, in Ningwangfu not far away, including Li Xian's own guards, there were about a dozen or so people on horses that rushed out of the side door and quickly disappeared into the night. Princess, wait here patiently. Once there is news, I will immediately send someone to pass on the message. The old woman had already straightened her back. After giving her instructions, she followed closely behind those people. Motherf *Ker, looks like we have to hurry up. Don't let others get ahead of us. Under the night sky, a dozen or so figures rushed along the mountain path. Zhu Tufu laughed and urged. Along the way, they actually saw many people from the green forest. They were most likely going in the same direction as them. Of course, those people were in groups of 2 or 3 at most. When they saw them, most of them stayed far away. There were also some who were willing to join them. After identifying their identities, they did not refuse and the group gradually grew larger. Who is it? A noise came from behind them and someone immediately turned around. From a corner on the mountain path, a few figures suddenly appeared. Those people did not seem to think that there would be so many people waiting for them after a corner. They seemed to be frightened by the situation in front of them. They stood where they were and did not move. Chapter 231. It's actually a scholar. Under the moonlight, they could vaguely see the leader's figure. One of them immediately laughed. Scholar, are you also here to kill that Lu Rui? The man laughed a few times and said mockingly, What's the point of a good scholar learning to fight and kill? Why don't you go home and study for a few more years? Tonight's operation, everyone actually had a relaxed attitude. At this moment, when they heard the man mocking the scholar for overestimating himself, they immediately roared with laughter. As for the others, they didn't think too much about it. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. What else could it be if it wasn't for that woman? Could it be that all of you heroes are here to take that woman's life? The scholar was stunned. After regaining his senses, he cupped his fists and said to the man in front of him, "Hee, that woman's martial arts are powerful. If you are afraid, why don't you come with us? When we catch her, you can slash her a few times to vent your anger." The man in front of him didn't put the scholar in his eyes, but the three men behind him seemed to have a strong aura. They were worth roping in. A look of pleasant surprise appeared on the scholar's face and he hurriedly said, "In that case, I'll have to thank this hero. That woman killed my brother and she and I are absolutely irreconcilable enemies. If I can take revenge today, I'll definitely have to thank all of you heroes." "You're too polite." The man laughed and reached out to pat the scholar's shoulder. The scholar easily dodged to the side. The man's face revealed a surprised expression. This scholar's words revealed a trace of a bandit's aura, and his movements were abnormally agile. He didn't look like a weak scholar at all. This is a bit interesting. Thinking that he had underestimated the scholar before, the man praised him. He didn't believe it and grabbed the scholar's shoulder. This time he used a bit more strength than before. The scholar raised his hand to block, but the man suddenly felt a strange force coming from his wrist. The next moment, the scholar grabbed his wrist and pulled, causing his body to involuntarily take a step forward. The young scholar clearly held back and didn't use much strength. The man steadied himself and the strange look in his eyes became even stronger. He cupped his fists and said, "May I ask which hero of the Lulan forest you are? Since he had such skills, he shouldn't be a nobody in the Jianghu. I don't deserve to be called a hero." He had used up almost all of his strength in that attack just now. The scholar calmed himself down and cupped his fists as he replied, "I've only killed a few people. I'm indebted to the heroes of the forest for their favor, so I've been given the nickname, Deadly Scholar. Life-stealing scholar." For a moment the burly man could not recall if there was such a person in the Jianghu. At this moment the people in front of him had already walked more than 10 steps. Without thinking too much, he cupped his fists and said, "So you are the fatal bookworm, it's an honor to meet you." The corner of the scholar's mouth twitched. At this moment the man urged, "It's getting late. Let's leave quickly." "That's good." The young scholar seemed to be eager to take the woman's life as well. He turned around and gestured to the 3 burly men behind him. The 3 of them looked at each other and nodded. They tightened the bulging bags on their backs and followed. As the few of them followed behind, they were questioned a little. Although they were not familiar with the bandit name of the deadly bookworm, they were not unfamiliar with it either. After all, most of the people in the forest had the same style of naming themselves. They had heard of names like Death-Stealing Life, Butcher King of Hell, and they were too lazy to differentiate between them. Seeing that the scholar was talking about killing people so casually, it did not seem like he was faking it. Not long after, they began to treat him as one of their own. Brother Zhou said that the woman is so beautiful that it would be a pity to kill her just like that. If you ask me, why don't we let our brothers have some fun after we catch her later? I'd like to see how she's different from ordinary women. Let's be careful lest we fail miserably and lose our precious lives. As the crowd discussed openly, there was not a single light in the stronghold a mile away. It was exceptionally quiet. That's strange, where did everyone go? A figure snuck into the stronghold silently. He wanted to capture someone and interrogate them about the woman's residence, but after going through a few courtyards he did not see a single person. Could it be that the woman had already gotten wind of it and escaped first? Or did someone beat me to it? He had a puzzled look on his face. There were many heroes who targeted the woman and he thought that he was fast enough. He did not expect that he was still one step too late. With that thought in mind, he had already climbed up another wall like a nimble monkey. When he entered the courtyard, he finally saw the lights in the house through the window. Someone's here. A hint of joy appeared on his face. Just as he was about to make a move, he heard a creak and the door opened. A hunched figure walked out from inside. The person was stunned for a moment before he immediately pounced on him. Under the moonlight, the cold edge of his blade gleamed and a chilling voice could be heard. "Old man, where is that Lu Rui? Answer me honestly and I'll spare your life." Bang! The skinny man punched the figure in black back. When the other party swung the weapon in his hand again, the skinny man suddenly sped up and punched the man's neck. With a crack, the man's eyeballs looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. His neck tilted and he fell to the ground, no longer breathing. That's the fifth one. He threw the man's body to the side. There were several figures lying on the ground. After a muffled sound, a black figure was thrown out from the courtyard wall, and there was another body on the ground. The sixth one. He murmured, wiped the blood from his arm and retreated into the courtyard wall. There were many people in the courtyard. When he walked in, a woman saw his arm and immediately helped him to the side to bandage the wound. A moment of carelessness, a moment of carelessness. When a few men walked over, he smiled awkwardly and said with some embarrassment, "Why are you here?" The man in the lead looked at him and asked with a frown. "The few of them are enough to guard the back. Moreover, the second young mistress is there too." The man smiled and said, "If those guys want to come in, they can only walk in front. I'm here to take a look. With the young mistress here, there's nothing to worry about here." The man's expression was rather relaxed. During the day, he had indeed been nervous for a while, but after seeing the scene just now, he had completely dispelled his worries. "They're here." Another figure pushed the door open and said in a low voice. The crowd looked at each other, took their weapons, and when they walked out, the figure with the sword was already walking in the direction of the village's entrance. "They're here." The group of more than 10 people stopped in front of the village in the mountains. Among the crowd, a man saw the young man with the bandit nickname, Deadly Scholar, and sighed. The expression on his face was rather complicated. Don't be anxious. In a while your brother's revenge will be avenged." The man laughed and said. In the darkness of the night, more than 10 figures walked over. The night was very bright and the crowd had good eyesight. They saw the young woman walking in front at a glance. "It's her. She's Lu Rui. What are they trying to do? Do they think that they can fight against us with just a few people?" The crowd began to speak. Bone-paring Knife, Zhu Tifu, Death Rush Tui Yen, the burly man with the surname Zhou, and the third lady narrowed their eyes. Their faces were filled with vigilance as they held their weapons in their hands. That woman knew that they were coming, but she was not afraid at all. There must be a trap and they could not let their guard down. "Heroes, I have an irreconcilable feud with that woman. If I don't kill her with my own hands, I'm afraid I won't be able to think straight. Let us go and meet her first." All of a sudden, a voice came from the back of the crowd. Everyone saw the deadly bookworm glaring at the figure in front of him. His face was contorted and filled with hatred. A few of the men beside him placed the bags on their backs on the ground, drew their weapons and charged forward. This sudden scene caused everyone to be slightly startled. For him to be this impatient, it would appear that there was some sort of blood feud between the life-stealing scholar and Lu Rui. Including Zhu Tufu and the others, no one stopped him. They were glad that someone was willing to take the lead and test the woman's strength. It was a good opportunity to see if the woman was up to no good. The few of them quickly rushed to the woman's side, but they did not see the clash of swords and weapons that they had expected. While they were puzzled, one of them suddenly exclaimed, "What's that sound?" Buzz. A faint sound could be heard faintly in the crowd's ears. Chapter 232. Buzz. The sound was soft, so soft that it was almost inaudible. However, these people were not ordinary people. Be it their eyesight or hearing, they were better than ordinary people. The moment the man spoke, the people around him immediately followed the source of the sound and looked down at the ground. The sound came from the 3 bundles on the ground. The deadly bookworm's men put them down just now. Everyone's attention was on the people in front of them just now, so not many people knew what the 3 men were doing behind the crowd. At this moment, one of them used his weapon to open the bundles and finally revealed the things inside. Although the moonlight was still bright, there were many people around and the ground was dark. The few people who surrounded them could only see a few black things that looked like clay pots. The sparks of fire flickered and went into the fist-sized black things. "What the hell is this?" one of them mumbled and scratched his head, confused. "What's going on inside?" A few voices came from the outside. The 3 men had placed the bundles right in the middle of the crowd. At this moment, more than 10 people were surrounding them and watching. The people outside had no idea what was going on, and their voices were filled with shock and doubt. "Husband, Uncle Fong, you guys. The calm expression on Lu Rui's pretty face disappeared instantly. Seeing Li Yi and Fong running over from the crowd, her expression changed drastically. "I'll deal with you later." There was still a faint pain at the back of her neck. Li Yi glared at her. While Lu Rui was still in a daze, he pushed her to the ground and rolled to a place not far away that was slightly lower than the ground. At the moment when Li Yi pounced on her, Lu Rui's body had already subconsciously prepared for it. However, she did not resist and allowed him to push her to the ground. "Get down." Old Fong and the other two men did not remain idle either. With a loud shout, they spread their arms wide and pounced on the remaining men. The men were not prepared for their own people. Caught off guard, they were suddenly pounced on and rolled to a spot not far from Li Yi's side like a gourd. One of the men dodged and did not fall to the ground. Old Fong did a somersault and kicked the man's calf. The man fell to the ground and was dragged over by Old Fong. Not only did the men not react to the sudden turn of events, but the dozens of people from the greenwood forest opposite them were also dumbfounded. For a moment, they could not figure out whether the deadly bookworm was a friend or a foe. Were they in cahoots with Lu Rui, or had the scholar used some sorcery to immobilize Lu Rui and the others and subdued them? However, none of this mattered now. What mattered was that this was a good opportunity for them. Zhu Tufu and the others gripped their weapons tightly in their hands and ran toward them. Not far away, Li Yi was lying on the ground with a puzzled look on his face. "That's not right. Why isn't there any sound? Is the fuse too long?" Just as this thought appeared in their minds, a bright light flashed before their eyes. An earth-shattering sound suddenly exploded in front of them. With this earth-shattering sound, the ground beneath them shook a few times. Even though Fong and the others had seen the power of a miniature version of gunpowder and were mentally prepared for it, they were still frightened by the sound just now. He got up and looked in that direction. The huge firework hadn't had time to dissipate yet. Cold sweat dripped down from the foreheads of the three of them. When they thought about how they were able to stand here unscathed after carrying such a thing on their backs, the three of them immediately felt as if they had just survived a disaster. If it had exploded on their backs, not even a complete corpse would have been left behind. "Who hubby?" Even though Lu Rui was a grandmaster, she could not maintain her composure at this moment. She looked at Li Yi in horror. She could not imagine that he was the one who had caused such a commotion. If they were in such a state, the other men were even worse off. Their minds were blank and their ears were buzzing. Because they were lying on the ground, they did not see what had happened in front of them. However, the earth-shattering sound made them feel weak in the knees and unable to stand up. At the same time, the old people, women and children who were left behind gathered in a small courtyard at the back of the stockade village. Lu Rui and a few men were standing guard around the courtyard. At some point, they all raised their heads at the same time and looked forward. "What's going on?" The men's bodies trembled as a look of shock appeared on their faces. "I'll go and have a look." Lu Rui gritted her teeth and said. She rushed towards the direction of the sound. In a small courtyard, a shocked old face peeked out from behind the door. "What's going on? Is there thunder?" Looking up at the sky, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The shock on the old face was even more intense. On the mountain road from the foot of the mountain to Willow Leaf Village, two groups of people on horses were galloping up. At night, the mountain road was rugged and difficult to travel. The people on horses were holding torches and the horses were not fast. When they encountered dangerous places, they could only lead the horses forward. "We're almost there. Everyone hurry up," the leader of the guards of Prince Ning Mansion said with a sullen face. This time, the Crown Prince had given a strict order to protect the safety of Li Li and his family. If they were late and made a big mistake, they would not be able to explain it to the Crown Prince when they returned. Half a mile ahead of them, the old woman led more than 10 masters from the palace. Their speed was even faster than the people on horses. A half-step grandmaster and a first-class master. If they have other companions, it shouldn't be difficult to deal with them for a while. The old woman murmured to herself and urged them. When she raised her head, they could vaguely see the village in the dark. Boom. At this moment, a bright light shot up to the sky. The old woman's body shook violently and she suddenly stopped moving. Although they did not receive her order, the dozen figures also stopped moving. Looking at the village in front of them that had returned to silence and darkness, they were shocked and bewildered. Behind them, the horses neighed. The guards of Prince Ning Mansion dismounted one after another. They comforted the frightened horses and looked ahead with frightened eyes. That bright light and loud noise just now. What was that? In front of the village there were dozens of heroes of the underworld. Less than 10 of them were still standing where they were. After the 3 bags exploded in the crowd, more than 10 people in the middle were instantly thrown to the ground. Not a single body was intact. Even the people on the periphery were holding a certain part of their body and wailing in pain. The metal shrapnel mixed in with the explosives was enough to turn a human body into a sieve at the moment of the explosion. The unlucky ones were hit in a vital part and immediately stopped breathing. The lucky ones were standing a little further away and were only affected by the blast. At this moment they were so scared that they collapsed to the ground. They were scared half to death by the strange scene just now. The few people who had rushed more than 10 steps with Zhu Tufu were the luckiest. Only one man fell to the ground holding his bleeding throat. The rest of the people turned to look at the place where they had been standing. At this moment, it had become a hell filled with broken limbs. The weapons in their hands fell to the ground with a clang. Chapter 233. Black gunpowder was highly sensitive and easily flammable. It could be ignited with just a small spark and it was extremely destructive. When a unit of gunpowder was ignited, its temperature could reach more than 1,000 degrees Celsius, and its volume could expand nearly 10,000 times, causing a violent explosion. These descriptions were what Li Yi had read from books. If the gunpowder was mixed with iron pieces when it exploded, the power would be no less than that of a bullet, and it could easily penetrate a human body. Of course, the books in the library would not describe these things. This kind of sinister method was something Li Yi had learned from a transmigration novel. Time was tight and Li Yi did not have the time to do a lot of experiments. After finding the formula of gunpowder from a book in a remote corner, he and Fong and the other 2 immediately started to prepare it. Fortunately, the process was smooth. This divine tool that had been verified by tens of thousands of transmigrators showed its power for the first time in this world. A huge pit was blasted on the ground. Within a radius of 10 feet from the center of the pit, there was no one alive and there were countless broken limbs. The people in the forest who were further away from the center and standing on the periphery were not directly affected by the explosion. However, the bullet-like iron pieces and iron nails had scratched them, and even if the damage was not fatal, it was enough to make them lose their fighting power. Of course, there were people who were lucky enough to survive, but after personally experiencing the scene just now, the companions who were talking and laughing around them were now corpses on the ground, and the surroundings were like hell. How many people could still muster up the courage? Devil, he's a devil. A few tall men who were lucky enough to not be injured had pale faces, and their bodies were shaking like a sieve. A fishy smell quickly spread from their lower bodies. Under that kind of heavenly might, the heroes of the underworld and the martial arts masters were no different from ordinary people. The deadly scholar. Zhu Tufu's shiny head still had a piece of colorful intestine hanging on it. It had flown over from behind when the explosion just now. His expression was incomparably savage, and his eyes almost split apart from rage. The battle hadn't even started, yet the several tens of men he'd brought with him were almost completely annihilated. And the source of all this was actually the scholar that he'd never looked straight at from the beginning until the end. Damn it, he's a spy sent by that woman. The burly man surnamed Zhou's expression was extremely gloomy. He had never expected that they would be defeated by such a person. At this time the scholar had already stood up several zhang away. Looking at the few figures standing in front of him, there was a black lump on the ground, and there was a bloody lump by his feet that he did not know what it was. Li Yi could not help but feel his stomach churn. In both of his lives, the only person who had died by his hand was Wu Ying. That sound just now was probably equivalent to 10 lifetimes of his. As a person with a modern soul, killing was still a huge psychological burden for him. But just like the time when he was kidnapped by Wu Ying, it was either kill or be killed. This was a very simple question. Living in such an era, you can be a hero of the underworld and I can be a lazy county magistrate. No one has it easy, so why make things difficult for each other? Li Yi was also helpless. Gunpowder was a very dangerous thing to both himself and others. If he was not careful, he might lose his life before he could blow up others. His goal was actually very low. He just wanted to live well and the people around him to live well. Was there anything lower than living? But some people just could not bear to see others live well. What Jianghu, what martial arts world, what heroes of the underworld, if they did not want others to live, then they should all die. The mountains will never change and the rivers will always flow. Lu Rui, deadly scholar, I'll come back for your lives in the future. Zhu Tufu held 2 boning knives in his hands. He really wanted to rush over and chop the man and woman into pieces to vent his anger, but he could only forcibly suppress this thought. In a short moment the strength of both sides had been reversed. Apart from the 4 of them who were not injured, the rest of the people were either dead or injured. Those who were not dead or injured had long been scared out of their wits. Even if they were extremely unwilling, they could only retreat first and think about it at length. With a stamp of his foot, he took the lead and rushed into the darkness behind him. There's no need for that. Just as he was about to rush out of the stockade, a cold voice came from behind. How could it be? When Zhu Tufu turned around, he only saw a flash of sword light in front of him. Before he could lift the boning knife in his hand, a line of blood appeared on his forehead. Bang! When Zhu Tufu's body fell to the ground, the faces of the gloomy man, the burly man surnamed Zhou, and the third lady changed dramatically. One move, only one move. Zhu Tufu did not even have the time to react. Such speed, such strength. When the woman turned around to look at the 3 of them, their hands were tightly gripping their weapons, but they were shocked to find that the thin figure was just standing there casually. To them it was like an insurmountable mountain. There was no flaw. There was only one possibility that could make them feel this way. Almost instantly, Cui Yan and the third lady's eyes suddenly turned to the burly man surnamed Zhou. Grandmaster, this woman was a grandmaster. At this moment the 2 of them even wanted to kill the burly man surnamed Zhou. Who on earth gave him the courage to summon the heroes of the underworld in such a high-profile manner to take the head of a grandmaster? Even without the earth-shattering commotion just now, with just the few of them leading a group of weaklings against a grandmaster who was going all out, even if they could kill him, not many of them would be able to return alive. Moreover, the other party wasn't alone. Not to mention the dozens of people with strong auras around her. Just the deadly scholar alone was enough to send them all to hell before they could see the person in question. Revenge? Senior Han's disciple? Squire Zhao's reward? All of them could go to hell. At this moment the most important thing was to stay alive. Third lady's speed was the fastest. Before Cui Yan and the man surnamed Zhou could react, she had already rushed down the mountain. The sudden appearance of more than 10 silhouettes made her extremely happy. If these people could entangle that woman, it wouldn't be difficult for her to escape tonight. Just as she was about to escape to the side, a skinny hand grabbed her neck in the darkness. Move again and I'll break your neck. The hoarse voice of the old woman rang out. More figures surrounded her from behind. Further away, the sound of horses' hooves could be heard amidst the flames and flames. By the time the old woman forced third lady's way by the neck, the shadowy man and the burly man surnamed Zhou had already gathered more than 10 people who could still stand. As for their companions who were groaning on the ground with broken limbs and could not even stand, they were no longer in the scope of their consideration. There was a grandmaster blocking their way and the people behind them were obviously enemies. After some consideration they felt that if they fought with the people behind them, they might have a chance of survival. With just the few of them they would definitely die if they went up against a grandmaster. Kill. The shadowy man and the burly man surnamed Zhou looked at each other, then led the remaining people and charged towards the back. Stop them, capture them alive. The old woman snorted coldly. More than 10 figures silently drew their weapons. Chapter 234. The people that the old woman brought were all masters from the palace. They were sent from the palace to protect Her Highness. If they couldn't even stop a few frightened mobs, they didn't need to follow the princess after they went back. They should just go and do whatever they wanted to do. The battle ended very quickly. It was a completely one-sided situation. Only the shadowy man and the man surnamed Zhou held on for 3 more seconds. The next moment, several knives were put on their necks at the same time. The old woman knocked out the third lady and handed her over to her subordinates. She planned to come and ask about the situation. After taking 2 steps, she looked at the shallow pit in front of her and stopped. Her old face suddenly became pale. Even though she had seen many big scenes in her life, the situation around the shallow pit under the moonlight still made her heart roll like waves. It took a long time for her to calm down. Give them a quick death. She took a deep breath, suppressed her emotions and said lightly. When the old woman's voice fell, a man had already walked in. After a few swings of the knife, there was no more moaning on the ground. When he saw the scene around him, the man couldn't help but take a deep breath. A little fear appeared on his calm face. These people, how did they die? The old woman looked at Li Yi and spoke with difficulty. At this moment she had completely forgotten the princess's instructions. Her mind was completely occupied by this hellish scene. These people have done all kinds of bad things. I'm afraid that God has annoyed them and punished them all. Li Yi sighed and said, just now there was thunder from the sky and the thunder snakes danced wildly. It was like God's punishment. After the punishment was over, these people were all like this. The old woman almost believed what he said. The loud sound and the fire just now spread out for more than a few miles. It was really like the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. How could it be done by a human? She stepped on the air twice, moved her foot and dug out a black iron piece from the soil. Then she looked at the people lying on the ground. She didn't know what to think, but her old face showed a shocked expression again. Even if it was really God's punishment, it couldn't be to punish these evil people. The old woman turned to look at Li Yi. He could actually attract God's punishment. Let the people of Ning Wangfu return and tell Princess and His Highness Shixi that County Lieutenant Li is safe and sound. In order to save trouble, more than half of the dozen or so people from the Greenwood Forest were knocked unconscious. The sound of hooves and the light of the fire were getting closer. As the old woman spoke, two figures responded and dashed towards the direction of the fire. As soon as he saw the old woman, Li Yi knew that it was impossible to hide the matter of the gunpowder. Sky Law's words could only be used to fool ordinary people. These old fellows were all shrewd. He was grateful that the princess and Li Xian had sent these people over, but he felt that it would be better if they didn't come. Get someone to clean up this place. Don't leave any traces. I will personally inform Her Royal Highness about the details tomorrow. Li Yi had a tired expression on his face as he sighed. He had no other choice but to make the gunpowder. This thing was too dangerous and sensitive. It could be a trump card to save one's life, but it could also be the king of hell. It would be fine if he did it secretly without being discovered, but since it was seen by the princess's people, he could only obediently hand it over to the country. What was the use of keeping such a powerful thing? Did he want to rebel? Other than the royal family, no one could touch this thing. Thinking that there was such a trouble for no reason, Li Yi felt more resentment towards those people from the Greenwood Forest. A bunch of bastards. They could have been bandits, but they had to come all the way here to die. Even in death they still want to make trouble for others. What are they after? There was a sound of wind breaking and a graceful figure appeared beside him. When Rui saw so many people in the field, he had already grasped the hilt of his sword. But when he saw the old woman standing beside Li Yi, his heart finally relaxed. What was that loud noise just now? He was still thinking about the strange movement just now. Before Li Yi could answer, she lowered her head and saw the ground not far in front of her. Her pretty face changed abruptly. In the next moment she could not help but hold on to Li Yi and retch. Although she was skilled in martial arts and had killed those bandits with a single slash, she had never seen such a bloody scene before. Retch. In fact, Li Yi's stomach was already churning. He was trying his best not to look at those things, but after being provoked by Lu Rui he could not hold it in anymore. Lu Rui held on to him and he held on to the wall. Their voices could be heard and the experts in the palace paled. They could not help but cover their mouths with their hands. The people brought by the old woman moved very quickly. The big hole in the ground was quickly filled by them, and the bloodstains were also buried. As for the corpses of the people in the Greenwood Forest, they were moved to a distant place and burned. As expected of the experts from the palace, the way they destroyed the corpses was very professional. Fong walked around in a circle with a lantern, but he could not find any trace of the huge pit. Even the metal pieces that were stuck in the ground were dug out by them. Before the guards of Prince Ning Mansion could come over, they were chased away by the old woman's people. The matter of Tian Fa was of great importance. Ordinary people could not know about it and the people of Prince Ning Mansion could not know about it. In fact, the old woman looked at Fong and the others with an unfriendly expression. Li Yi pondered in his heart, should he keep this old woman and run away with the rest of the people in the stockade? In the distance, the old woman and her people surrounded a bonfire. They seemed to be interrogating the captives, glancing at them from time to time. This was actually one of the reasons why Li Yi did not intend to hide it. If all the people in the forest were dead and there were no witnesses, it would be fine as long as they cleaned up the scene and did not leave any traces. But if those people were captured by the old woman with a little intimidation, they would most likely tell the truth. No matter what excuse he made up, it would be useless. The largest group of people in the forest had been wiped out, and the remaining small characters were not a concern. Looking at the old woman's expression, they did not intend to leave tonight and they could serve as guards. Li Yi shook his head and entered the courtyard. Lu Rui sat in the courtyard and raised her head to look at him. She did not speak. She did not feel as nauseous as before, but she could not get those images out of her mind. It was likely that she would not be able to sleep tonight. Li Yi walked straight into his room, closed the door and lit the oil lamp. He sat in front of the table and stared at the flickering fireworks. He had lived in his original world for 20 years and had only lived here for a few months. Many of his previous thoughts and ways of thinking had not changed. It was not until he was mercilessly slapped by reality again and again that he finally truly understood what kind of era this was. There were rulers here who could kill people and confiscate their possessions with a word. There were fierce bandits who dared to kill and rob for the slightest bit of greed. There were so many so-called powerful people in the forest who disregarded the law and human life. This was the true appearance of this world. He had business dealings with Prince Ning Mansion and he had a close relationship with the heir. Her Highness the Princess often went to his place to eat, and even went to his bed when she was drunk. But at a critical moment, what use was all of this? All of them are unreliable. The corners of his mouth twitched and a self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. Chapter 235. Li Yi was very melancholy, very melancholy. Just a few months ago he was just eating and waiting to die. Every day he would lie in the courtyard and bask in the sun. When he had nothing to do, he would tease the little servant girls, tell stories to the naughty children, and fight with Mississippi Lou for the last piece of chicken on the plate. It was a leisurely life. He did not know when it all started to change. He earned more and more money, the people he met became more and more distinguished, the money at home piled up like a mountain, and he spent all day talking and laughing with the princess and heir. The carriage of life started to move in a direction that he did not expect. That horse was so fast that it could not be pulled back. He thought that he could earn a little money and be content with a little wealth. A few days ago he was kidnapped and almost lost his life. This time he was attacked by dozens of people. He had never experienced such an exciting thing in his 2 lives. Gunpowder had been invented, but new troubles had followed. Although he did not know how much importance the emperor would place on this thing, no matter what the result was, it was unlikely that he would be able to live the way he had before. Moreover, today's matter gave him a wake-up call. Whether it was working with Ning Wangfu or his friendship with Li Xian, they were all illusory. If he used them as a trump card, he would die a terrible death sooner or later. In the past he was really used to being lazy and thought about things in a simple way. Looking at it now, he was a little too naive. The oil lamp on the table gave off a spark. Li Yi rubbed his slightly swollen eyebrows. The injured area on his abdomen started to hurt again. After all, his injuries had not completely healed, and it was not suitable for him to make any strenuous movements. However, he had no other choice today. He had been rushing about, and in order to make the gunpowder in time, he did not even have time to eat. At this moment, his old injuries were showing signs of relapse, and his stomach was also unbearably hungry. There was also a faint pain coming from the back of his neck. Li Yi rubbed the back of his head and a trace of anger appeared on his face. Today, in front of so many people, he was knocked unconscious by Rui. It was a great humiliation. If he could not re-establish his authority as a husband, he would not be able to stay in this family in the future. Of course, knocking him out wasn't the main point. The main point was the attitude she had displayed throughout the entire incident. It was truly infuriating. There was a slight sound of footsteps outside the door, and then the door was pushed open. Lu Rui walked in with a tray in her hand. She put a bowl of steaming porridge on the table and said softly, "Uncle Fong said that you haven't eaten all day, so I just cooked some porridge. You should eat it while it's hot." Li Yi raised his head to look at her. He did not speak, nor did he move. Lu Rui knew that he was angry. Thinking of what he had just said, "I'll settle accounts with you later," She evaded his eyes and said, "My husband, remember to eat your porridge early. I'll leave first." Just as she was about to open the door and escape, an arm reached out from behind and pressed against the door. Panicking, she turned around and almost touched the tip of Li Yi's nose. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" At this time, in the flickering light of the room, the posture of the young man and woman was very similar to a kind of action called wall knocking in the future. According to the current situation, it should be more appropriate to call it door knocking. The expression on Li Yi's face was very serious, without a trace of cynicism. Lu Rui's answer was very important to him. "Slate, my husband, you should rest early." The expression on Lu Rui's pretty face became more panicked. When she was about to escape from the other side, Li Yi's other hand pressed against her. The palm that was supposed to be pressed on the door was pressed on her chest because of her sudden movement. Lu Rui's body froze. After the expression on her face froze, her pretty face immediately became extremely red. Looking up at Li Yi, she said in a trembling voice, "Husband, my husband." At this moment she was just a shy and ordinary woman. How could she look like a grandmaster of a generation? However, when she raised her head and met Li Yi's gaze, she saw something different in his eyes that were as deep as a pool of water. She understood the hidden emotions in Li Yi's eyes, causing her body to tremble. Her face gradually turned from red to pale. It was as if something very important to her was about to leave her. Biting her lower lip, she lowered her head and said, "I know I was wrong." Li Yi heaved a sigh of relief. He seemed to have put down something in the bottom of his heart. He looked at her and asked, "Tell me, what did you do wrong?" After saying that, he felt that there was something wrong with the touch of one of his hands. When he looked down, he could not help but be stunned. No wonder his hand felt soft. "I shouldn't have knocked you out, my husband." She lowered her head and said softly, "What else?" This was not the time to retreat. Li Yi pretended not to notice that his hand was placed where it should not be and continued to ask. Although she shouldn't have knocked him out, this was only a superficial reason. As the saying goes, husband and wife are birds in the same forest. When disaster strikes, they separate. But husband and wife are one. If there are any difficulties, they can discuss and solve it together. Chauvinism is not good. She knocked him out at this critical moment and sent him down the mountain. Did she never see him as her husband? Also, Lu Rui thought for a moment and said, "I shouldn't have made the decision on my own and given those who left 10 taels of silver as relocation allowance to each household." What? Li Yi's eyes widened. 10 taels of silver as relocation allowance? He calculated in his heart. If the Lu family and the villagers were given 10 taels of silver each, wouldn't that mean that he had spent nearly 300 taels of silver today? This wastrel. How many times did he have to blackmail Li Xian to earn back the 300 taels of silver? It was over. With this, the back garden of the big house had been given away. Li Yi's heart ached. No matter how you put it, they have been implicated by me. Lu Rui sighed and said, "Forget it. Don't do it again." 300 taels of silver was fine. He could earn it back. After those people left, it would be peaceful in the future. Lu Rui lowered her head and Li Yi put his hand on her chest. When the two of them stopped talking and diverted their attention, the atmosphere gradually became awkward. Li Yi's stomach growled. He pretended to be careless and removed his hand from her chest. Lu Rui breathed a sigh of relief and said hurriedly, "Husband, hurry up and eat the porridge. It's going to get cold soon." Li Yi nodded. He was really hungry now. After the scene just now gradually faded in his mind, his appetite also recovered a lot. He quickly finished the porridge. He touched his belly and slightly frowned. "Is the wound starting to hurt again?" Lu Rui asked worriedly. "A little," Li Yi said. "Husband, lie on the bed first. I will use my true qi to help you comb your meridians." Lu Rui put away the bowls and chopsticks and said. Every time Rui helped him comb his meridians, it was probably when Li Yi felt the most comfortable. Her hands seemed to have some kind of magic that could reduce the pain to the minimum. Li Yi lay on the bed and closed his eyes. While he was enjoying it, the tiredness brought about by running around for a whole day gradually came over him. When Lu Rui withdrew her hands, she saw that he was breathing evenly. He had already fallen asleep. She was startled for a moment and her pretty face suddenly blushed. She looked around and took off her embroidered shoes. She curled up at the foot of the bed and crossed her slender legs. She wrapped her arms around herself and quietly looked at his relaxed expression. Her pretty face alternated between shyness and confusion. After an unknown amount of time, she peeked outside the door like a thief and lay down beside Li Yi. She slept with her clothes on. She turned her head to the side and glanced outside before slowly closing her eyes. At this moment, the young girl sitting in the courtyard stared blankly at the round moon in the sky. Occasionally, she would glance at the door not far away. Even when the lights in the room were extinguished, no one came out from inside. A trace of astonishment appeared on her pretty face, and her beautiful eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 236. Li Yi had a dream, a very erotic dream. He couldn't remember the content of the dream clearly after he woke up. He only remembered that the woman in the dream had an enchanting figure, but her face was always covered with a layer of fog. Later the fog dispersed. What happened next was even more bizarre. At first the woman looked like Rui. Then somehow she turned into Wan Ruoqing. Then she turned into Li Mingzhu. What was even more bizarre was that she turned into Miss Lu in the end. Then Li Yi woke up with a start. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and erased the scene of Mississippi Lu chasing him with a sword from his mind. The reason why he knew it was an erotic dream was that when he was about to put on his clothes, he was embarrassed to find that his underwear was wet. He sat on the bed and stared blankly for a while. He didn't even remember how he fell asleep last night. The faint fragrance around him made him a little more awake. Unfortunately, he still couldn't remember the content of the erotic dream. He changed into a clean underwear and got up to wash his underwear in the morning. Rui pushed the door open and came in with a basin of hot water. Seeing what he was doing, she put down the copper basin and said, "Come and wash first, my husband. I'll wash your clothes." Li Yi was embarrassed to let others wash his underwear for him even though they were close. Li Yi was about to refuse when an old woman with a straight face came in from outside and said, "County Magistrate Li, my lady is here." Since the princess was here, Li Yi had to put down what he was doing first. He simply washed his face, wiped it, and followed her outside. Most of the people in Willow Leaves village had left and the houses were empty. Last night the old woman and the others rested in one of the houses. When Li Yi and the old woman walked over, the people she brought yesterday were guarding around. After Li Yi went in, he immediately closed the door. A dozen people patrolled around the yard. Although it was not so exaggerated that even a fly couldn't fly through, it was extremely strict. A stooped old man with white hair and a trembling body approached from afar. Just as he was about to enter the courtyard, a guard hurried over and blocked his way. "Old man, you can't go in here," the guard said politely. His tone was gentle. Her Royal Highness was in the courtyard next door. The people in the surrounding courtyards had been cleared out by them. For the safety of Her Royal Highness, of course, they couldn't let this old man in. "This is my home. Why can't I come in?" The old man was stunned for a moment. He raised his head and looked at him with narrowed eyes. "What's going on? I went out for a stroll early in the morning, and now I'm not even allowed to enter the house?" The guard forced a smile and said, "Old man, why don't you take a stroll outside and come back later?" The guard felt depressed. If Her Royal Highness hadn't told him not to be rude to the people here, he wouldn't have talked so much nonsense with this old man. The old man looked at him with dissatisfaction and said, "My old arms and legs can't walk anymore. Who are you? Do you still respect the law? Does the world outside still belong to the Li family?" The guard's mouth couldn't help but twitch. He couldn't answer the old man's words. At this moment the old woman noticed the situation here. She walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nanny, this old man insisted on going in." The guard cupped his hands and respectfully retreated to the side. "This kind of thing should be solved by the people above. We still have to respect the law." The old man shook his head and slowly walked towards the courtyard. "Stop." The old woman didn't care so much. She immediately reached out to grab the old man's shoulder. When the old man took a step forward, he accidentally tripped on the stairs. His entire body staggered and he almost fell to the ground. However, the old woman's grab just happened to miss. He used his walking stick to stabilize himself and stood up with great difficulty. He shook his head and sighed, "I'm old, I'm useless." A trace of doubt flashed across the old woman's face. Just as she was about to make another move, the old man massaged his waist and seemed to be talking to himself. Young lady's legs are still nimble. It's just that these mantis claws are a bit lacking. Hearing this, the old woman's expression froze. At this moment, the old man had already pushed open the courtyard's door and walked in. Young lady. The guard didn't hear the second half of what the old man said. He almost couldn't help but laugh when he heard the way the old man addressed the nanny. However, after thinking about it carefully, this old man was a bit older than the nanny. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with what he said. At this moment, the guard didn't notice that the old woman's face was pale. You too? His murky old eyes were filled with dissatisfaction and disbelief as he murmured two words. When Li Yi walked in, Mingzu, who was dressed in light clothing, was standing in the courtyard. She pointed at the stone table and stone stools that had been wiped clean and said, "Sit. Since you knew those people were coming yesterday, why didn't you come find me?" Mingzu sat down opposite him and asked him. "Just a small matter, there was no need to trouble you." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Based on the scale of the people in the forest last night, unless there were enough experts, or if they directly mobilized the troops stationed in the prefectural city, otherwise they wouldn't have much of an effect. Even if she was the princess, she didn't have the power to mobilize the troops. Furthermore, she was always elusive. After hitting a wall at Ning Wangfu in an emergency, she didn't have the time to ask her for help. It was better to use the most direct and effective method, just like last night." Mingzhu's expression was slightly shocked. She had learned about the danger last night from the nanny, but she didn't think that when he spoke of this matter he would be so indifferent. The sky punishment, last night, what happened? After seeing with her own eyes that Li Yi was fine, her heart relaxed and she went straight to the point. Speaking of which, this matter was actually the biggest unexpected gain last night. Did the person in front of her, whom she and her royal father had placed such high hopes on, really attract the sky punishment? She had personally asked those people of the forest who had been captured, but those people had long been scared out of their wits and didn't know anything. The few who knew had most likely died under the sky punishment at that time. If I said that the heavens couldn't stand their actions and sent down lightning to strike them all to death, would you believe me? Li Yi asked probingly. Mingzi looked straight at him. Li Yi sighed. Then if I said that this is the forbidden 5 lightning heaven heart mantra, passed down from generation to generation in the Li family and only passed down to males and not females, you definitely wouldn't believe me, right? Stop it. Mingzi looked at him and said. As expected, he couldn't fool her. Li Yi used his own experience to prove that it was not easy to fool the ancient people just because they had less than 1,000 years of evolution. Excuses like the sky punishment forbidden mantra couldn't fool them at all. Can I not say it? Li wanted to try one last time. No, Her Highness answered quickly and straightforwardly. She had heard the nanny describe the scene last night. If she could master that level of power, it would have an extraordinary significance to the Jing kingdom, which was not as strong as the surrounding countries. Of course, she was still in a fog about that power. What exactly it was, whether it could be mastered by anyone other than Li Yi, and whether it could be used on a large scale were all unknown at the moment. I have a condition. Li Yi took a deep breath and said. Say it. As long as it's not too much, I can satisfy you, Mingzi said generously. She had been with Li Yi for a long time. Putting aside their good personal relationship, she admired his ability and talent very much. Naturally, she wouldn't be too stingy. I'm the only one who knows the core secret of that thing. It has nothing to do with anyone else. I hope you won't make it difficult for them, Li Yi said, looking at her. When he said that, Mingzi finally realized that what he was going to say next was extremely important. Of course, she also understood the reason why he had been so worried since he came in. I hope you can understand. Mingzi looked at him with a serious expression and said, You are more important than the sky punishment. When she said that, it was from the bottom of her heart without any perfunctory or pretense. In fact, that was exactly what she thought in her heart. Li Yi was a person who could create miracles and surprises. Just the fact that he could control the sky punishment was more important than the sky punishment itself. Li Yi was stunned. He was surprised by her words. Am I really that important? When he turned around and saw her serious expression, he couldn't help but be moved. Is this a confession? Chapter 237. Are you saying that this thing called gunpowder has already existed for a long time? Emmingsu looked at him and asked with a frown. Li Yi nodded and said, fireworks, firecrackers and the acrobatics in the brothel are actually the same principle as gunpowder. The formula for gunpowder had actually been created by a crazy Daoist who wanted to take gunpowder to ascend to the heavens. However, the ratio was not right, so it could not achieve the effect that gunpowder should have. And its application was actually very wide. When Li Yi was in the brothel, he had seen the acrobats spitting out smoke and they used gunpowder. Then why didn't they? Emmingsu only said half of the sentence, but the meaning was very clear. If fireworks and acrobats could cause the commotion last night, those people should have died long ago, and it was even more impossible for them to be discovered until now. Li Yi explained, this is about the ratio of each ingredient in the formula. Even if it is a very small difference, the effect will be like heaven and earth. How did you discover the secret? Emmingsu looked at him and asked curiously. She had actually been pondering this question in her heart for a long time. Whether it was the problem of the falling stone or the horseshoe or the method of seeing through people's hearts, or the current gunpowder for thousands of years, no one in the whole world had discovered the secret behind it. Why did it have to be him? Why did it have to be him every time? Could it be that he was really smarter than everyone in the world combined? Li Yi thought in her heart, how else could he discover it? He relied on the accumulation of hundreds and thousands of years of knowledge, and the library in his mind to cheat. At that time I was just making firecrackers for fun. As I was making it, I accidentally discovered it. Li Yi looked at her and said. Emmingsu glanced at him. She felt that he must have accumulated a lot of good karma in his previous life for him to be able to sit here and talk to her now. Then she thought of another question and asked again, in that case, other people can also discover the mystery behind it? Li Yi rubbed the space between his eyebrows. She could control herself, but could she control others? From the perspective of probability, that is indeed the case. Li Yi looked at him and said, maybe a few days, a few months, a few years or even a few decades. But maybe tomorrow a second person will discover it. Probability. Emmingsu was confused again. What is probability? That's not important. Li Yi waved his hand, looked at her and said seriously, the important thing is, what do you plan to do after I give you the formula? Right now, the Jing Kingdom's soldiers are at war with the Qi Kingdom at the border. If the gunpowder is really as powerful as you've said, it'll be a great achievement for you. If you can perform meritorious deeds on the battlefield, my imperial father will definitely reward you. In fact, it's highly possible that you'll be promoted to an official position. Emmingsu thought for a moment before she looked at him and said slowly. If such a national treasure was discovered by an ordinary person, what awaited him would not be a reward but a disaster. In order to prevent the secret formula from being leaked, he would probably be executed in secret. The best outcome would be imprisonment for life. This was because the secret formula was of great importance. Once it was leaked to other countries, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, Li Yi was different. The more outstanding his performance, the more important he would be in her imperial father's heart. He was originally a talent that her imperial father admired greatly. The reason why he had not transferred him to the capital, but only made him a lowly county officer, was that he wanted him to polish himself for 2 years. After all, although he was very ambitious, he was really lazy. Such a character was not suitable for development in the imperial court. In fact, in the beginning, even she herself did not know why her imperial father would value someone he had only met once. Just based on his previous actions, it was far from enough. However, what happened later forced her to admit that her imperial father was indeed her imperial father. His judgment of people was far superior to hers. The young man sitting in front of her was an existence that could constantly create miracles. After she finished speaking, she looked at Li Yi, but found that he did not seem to be in high spirits. The lifelong pursuit of a scholar is nothing more than to be promoted to an official position. But you don't seem to be interested in these things. She finally asked the question that had puzzled her for a long time. Li Yi looked at her and asked, if everyone's ideals were the same as the princess, shouldn't you be deep in the palace right now? Emmingsu was speechless for a moment, not knowing how to answer. After a moment she raised her head to look at Li Yi again and said, you know, this kind of life can't continue forever. Li Yi nodded non-committally. After experiencing this incident, he also realized how childish his previous thoughts were. Living in such an era, it was not so easy to live a carefree and unfettered life. Even the emperor, who decided whether everyone's life was carefree or not, could not be associated with the word carefree. The government can't always keep an eye on those people from the Lulan forest. Although they are not a threat to your wife, the others will still be troublesome. Immerse looked at him and said, I will find a place in the prefecture city for them to settle down first. With regards to Lu Rui, she had some thoughts of comparing them in her heart previously. But now she really did not have any thoughts at all. We will discuss the matter of the gunpowder in detail when you return to the prefecture city. Immerse did not continue to ask Li Yi about the gunpowder formula. She stood up and clapped her hands in farewell. The thing that emitted the fire and loud noise yesterday, does it have a name? She turned back to ask when she reached the door. Perhaps we can call it hand grenade? Li Yi thought for a moment and said, then let's call it sky punishment. After a pause, Immerse nodded and simply turned to leave. Li Yi sat in the courtyard for a while, a thoughtful expression on his face. After a while he also stood up and left. Her Highness did not directly take the formula for the gunpowder, which was indeed out of his expectations. But he also knew that she was conveying a kind attitude to him, a kind of friendly attitude. Li Yi sighed. He had to admit Her Highness was very courageous. But this kind of hot potato, unless it was necessary, he would not touch it again in the future. When he once again returned to his own courtyard, Xiao Huan was holding two red and swollen eyes, drying the underwear that Li Yi had washed before he left. When she saw Li Yi, her little mouth twitched and her eyes immediately filled with tears. Last night she had been left alone in the county government and had been worried the whole night. It was only in the morning that she was brought up by the constable's sister. Son-in-law. The next moment she threw herself into Li Yi's arms like a swallow throwing itself into his arms, tears falling down her cheeks. Chapter 238. The little servant girl didn't sleep at all last night. At this time she was finally relieved and threw herself into Li Yi's arms. She cried and her voice gradually became softer. After a while, Li Yi looked at the girl who was breathing evenly and still had traces of tears on her face. He shook his head helplessly, bent down and carefully carried her horizontally. After returning to his room, he gently laid her down on the bed and covered her with a quilt. Although it was thrilling last night, after this incident, no gangsters from the Green Forest would dare to come to Willow Leaf Village to make trouble. After the earth-shattering experience, Willow Leaf Village returned to its usual peace in one night. But in some other places the waves were just starting to rise. The roadside tea houses far away from the prefectural city had always been the gathering place for people from Jianghu. Drinking tea and resting was only one of the reasons. Another important reason was that they could get the latest information here. Most of the big and small things that happened in Jianghu came from here. The tea house was simply built with a few pieces of wood. The winter weather was cold, so the roof was covered with a straw curtain and the surroundings were covered with dark coarse cloth. The space inside the tea house wasn't big. Around several old wooden tables, all of them were filled with people. The space seemed a little crowded. Two strong men opened the curtain and the cold wind poured in from outside. Seeing that the tea house was so crowded and there seemed to be no place to sit, the two of them were startled and didn't immediately walk in. If you want to come in quickly. The strange wind today is really cold. Being blown by the cold wind outside, the person closest to the door tightened his clothes and urged. The two of them put down the curtain and walked in. After looking around, they still couldn't find a place, so they squatted down in the corner and said, "Waiter, give me a pot of hot tea." "Okay, please wait a moment." The waiter touched his head with some doubts. The business of the tea house was always slow, but these days it was surprisingly good. There were often not enough seats in the room. Soon he put aside his doubts and ran to prepare the tea. "There's still no news of Zhu Tufu and the others. I'm afraid they're dead." The two of them squatted on the ground and waited for the waiter to serve tea. A square-faced man murmured, "I guess so." Another man nodded and said, "However, this matter is a little too inconceivable. Zhu Tufu's group of several dozen people is quite a force in the entire Jianghu. How could they just disappear without a trace? Not even the slightest bit of news has been sent out." It's good that he's dead. At least the Jianghu will be less chaotic, the square-faced man said. Brothers, are you talking about that bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu? A gentle voice came from the front. The two looked up and saw a man smiling at them at a table in front of them. That's Zhu Tufu. The square-faced man cupped his hands and said, Brothers, would you like to join us for a chat? The man smiled and said to the people beside him, Everyone squeeze a little and make room for these two brothers. Thank you, brothers. The two of them looked at each other and didn't refuse. They sat down on the seats that the others had vacated. My name is Xianxia. May I know how to address you two brothers? The man personally poured tea for them and asked with a smile. The name of Hero Chen resounds like thunder. The two of them looked at the man in surprise. Then the square-faced man introduced himself. I am Zhang Dujiang and this is my younger brother. After hearing the man's name, the two men were relieved. The hero Chen in front of them was not someone that those self-proclaimed heroes of the Jianghu could compare with. He came from a prestigious family and was already somewhat famous at a young age. When he went out to roam the Jianghu, he did many things to help the weak and the bully. He had a good reputation in the Jianghu. After exchanging names with the men at the table, the conversation became more casual. Brother Zhang just mentioned Zhu Tufu. Do you have any news of him? Chen Jingxing saw the two of them looking at him and explained, To tell you the truth, I have been tracking Zhu Tufu for a long time. That evil person calls himself a hero and brings disaster to the Jianghu. Chivalrous people like us all want to get rid of him, but we haven't been able to find any trace of him. When I heard that he appeared in Qing and Prefecture, I immediately rushed over. The man surnamed Zhang took a sip of tea and said, We only know that Zhu Tufu the bone-paring knife and Cui Yan the Deathbringer are leading dozens of Jianghu bandits. They are going to the Willow Leaf village to cause trouble for a woman. But the strange thing is, after last night's operation, there has been no news of them. Is it that woman surnamed Lu? Qin Jingxing asked. The man surnamed Zhang nodded. I have long heard that there is a heroine in Qing and Prefecture who has captured countless scum of the Jianghu. She is truly a role model for our generation. When I heard about this the day before yesterday, I wanted to gather my fellow comrades to help, but I was too late. The man surnamed Qin sighed and said in a regretful tone, the bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu has now had his bones shaved off. The Deathbringer Cui Yan has long since gone to hell to meet the King of Hell. At this time a voice came from the side. In the tea house, everyone was originally listening to the man surnamed Qin speak. When these words came out, the person who spoke immediately became the focus of the tea house, and countless gazes looked over. What do you mean by that? Could it be? Qin Jingxing asked with a face full of bewilderment. The person laughed again and said, Last night, not long after Zhu Tufu and the others went up the mountain, there were suddenly several loud noises coming from the mountain, and there were faint flashes of fire and thunder. It is said that Zhu Tufu and the others had committed many evil deeds and angered the heavens, so they were all struck to death by heavenly punishment. Qin Jingxing laughed and said, Such a story is too absurd. Could it be that you really believe it? He had also heard of heavenly punishment today, but he had only laughed it off. If this was true, then wouldn't all the villains in the world have been struck to death? The person stood up and walked out the door. When he lifted the curtain, he said indifferently, This morning, someone saw the soldiers carrying the corpses of Cui Yan and the others down the mountain. I heard from my brothers in the Yamen that the dozens of bandits from the Greenwood Forest who caused trouble last night have all been executed. All executed. In the tea house, everyone who heard these words had incomparably shocked expressions on their faces. If Zhu Tufu and the others were only a few people and they were killed by that woman, perhaps they would only think that the woman's martial arts were very high and they would not be too surprised. But those were dozens of bandits from the Greenwood Forest. This force was not small even in the entire martial world. It was really hard to imagine that they had all died. When the crowd wanted to continue asking, the person who had just spoken had already left the tea house, obviously unwilling to speak any further. Many people were shocked and found it hard to digest this news. There were also a few people who secretly changed their expressions. In the Jianghu, there were quite a few people who paid attention to this matter. In just half a day, similar news had spread from everywhere. Since the previous night, no one had seen the dozens of people who were with Zhu Tufu, which indirectly proved the authenticity of this news. Until someone used all kinds of connections to obtain accurate news from the government. In order to capture those villains, the government had already sent experts to lie in ambush there, waiting for them to come to them. And the bandits from last night had stubbornly resisted, and they had indeed all been executed. This news, without a doubt, threw a huge rock into the already turbulent lake. A huge wave with Qing'an Prefecture as the center, swept out in all directions. Chapter 239. For the servants of Ning Wangfu, today was a very normal day. Every day Wang Fei would sit in the garden for a while. The gardeners who had worked in the Fu for their entire lives would use scissors to trim the flowers and plants every morning. Wang Fei liked cleanliness. The places she frequented would be cleaned almost every day. The servants had their own duties and were busy at their own positions. When a well-dressed and valiant-looking man walked by, he attracted the attention of the maids in the prince's mansion. Its bodyguard Lin. The faces of the servant girls showed admiration. Their eyes stared at the disappearing figure of the man and they started to whisper. Hey, did you guys notice that when bodyguard Lin walked by he looked at me a bit more? Shoo shoo shoo, bodyguard Lin was clearly looking at me. Hey, you two aren't ashamed. Bodyguard Lin's eyes wouldn't be that bad. As the servant girls talked, they started to tease and push each other. The servants nearby swallowed their saliva. Isn't he just the leader of the guards? No matter how strong he is, isn't he still a servant like us? Thinking about the way the servant girls looked at that man, they didn't feel good. They were all servants, but wasn't that Lin just a bit more handsome, a bit more skilled and was more favored by Wang Yi? What was so great about that? That group of servant girls that only knew how to judge people by their appearance was really vulgar. Last night when a servant woke up he saw that guy and a group of people coming back in the middle of the night. They were very sneaky and didn't seem to have done anything good. If there was a chance he had to remind them. You might know a person's face but not their heart. They shouldn't be fooled by a few words from that Lin. The man surnamed Lin naturally didn't know what the servant girls and servants were thinking as he walked with large strides towards Wang Ye's study. Wang Yi loved books to the point that he was crazy. There were only 2 study rooms in the Fu and they were filled with all kinds of valuable books. If Wang Yi wasn't accompanying Wang Fei every day, there was a 90% chance that he would be in the study room. When he reached the door of the study room, there was naturally an old housekeeper who went in to report. A moment later the old housekeeper came out of the study. After nodding to him, the man surnamed Lin pushed open the door and walked in. Wang Yi. He respectfully bowed to the middle-aged man across the desk and waited at the side. Why did Xian'er send you out last night? After waiting for a while, King Ming's voice sounded. Your Highness, it's because. He didn't dare to hide anything from His Highness and told him everything. Before we arrived there, the conflict had already ended. The princess's people were also there and asked us to come back directly. However, I heard that County Magistrate Li and the others were unharmed, and those Greenwood bandits were all killed. As for what happened last night, I don't know. Yesterday, before they arrived at the Willow Leaf Village, they were driven back by the princess's people. That was all they knew. What? There's actually such a thing? Prince Ning was slightly stunned when he heard this. He then realized that the reason why Li Yi came to the Wang Fu to see him yesterday was because of this matter. If he had known in advance he wouldn't have rejected him like that, but it was too late now. However, with the masters brought by Emingzu from the palace, those Greenwood bandits wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. The guard leader wanted to tell him about the white light and the loud noise he saw, but on the way back some brothers said it was an earthquake, some said it was haunted, and some even said it was a divine punishment. At this moment he really didn't know what to say. In order to avoid saying something wrong, he simply kept his mouth shut. Prince Ning called him here was nothing more than to know what Li Xian had done. As for Li Yi, it would be best if nothing happened to him. If something happened to him he would only feel sorry for a moment, and maybe he would completely forget about it tomorrow. After all, these ordinary people didn't matter to him. He waved his hand indicating that the guard could go out. Excuse me. The guard surnamed Lin bowed and left the room. Prince Ning shook his head and put this matter behind him. He once again focused on the book in front of him. Within a day the dozens of families in Willow Leaf Village left only a dozen families. It didn't take Li Yi much effort to persuade them, and almost all of them agreed to move to the prefecture. He didn't even persuade them. He just mentioned it and they readily agreed. They had lived in a place for a lifetime, so of course they had feelings. However, the village was too remote and it was inconvenient to come and go. Almost all of these people had been working for Li Yi since the beginning, so they didn't leave at the critical moment. After selling candied fruits for so long, Ruilu also got dividends, so they had accumulated a lot of money at home. Their thoughts that they didn't have before gradually became active. Living in the prefecture had many conveniences. Moreover, they didn't need to spend money to move and someone would naturally arrange for them. This kind of good thing was rare. Hee son-in-law, if you want us to move, we will move. Fong became simple and honest again. His experience in the past few months told him that it was not wrong to listen to the son-in-law. As for the others, they only knew that if they followed in Fong's footsteps, they would have food to eat, money to earn, and a new house to live in. Although this was not the capital city, it was very easy for the princess to settle more than 10 families in the prefecture. Of course, it was impossible for every family to be assigned a big house. The location of the place was in the Golden Area, and it was said that it used to be the mansion of a rich businessman. It was not small, and there were many independent courtyards which were enough to accommodate so many people. At noon, Emmingsu sent 2 people to pick them up. That afternoon, everyone had already packed up their luggage. They didn't have any valuable things at home, and if they needed something they could buy it in the city. Are we leaving now? At the entrance of the village, second granduncle leaned on his walking stick and looked at the empty village with a nostalgic expression on his old face. Second granduncle, don't be sad. We are going to live in a big house at the foot of the mountain. Seeing this, Fong comforted him. Not to mention second great-uncle who had lived here his whole life. Even he felt a little reluctant to leave when he was about to leave. Let's go, let's go. The old man waved his hand. After looking at the village again, he took the lead and walked forward. Fong hurriedly chased after him. Second granduncle, the mountain road is hard to walk on. Do you want me to carry you? My old arms and legs can still walk these few steps. Then let me carry your bag. In front of second granduncle, Fong was especially attentive. Xiaohuan carried her small bag in her arms. When they walked out of the village, she looked up at Li Yi and asked, "Son-in-law, are we coming back after going to the prefecture?" "We're not coming back." Li Yi patted her head and said with a smile. The little maid nodded and turned her head again. She looked deeply at the place where she grew up. There was a little reluctance on her face, but it quickly turned into determination. She was a maid. Wherever Miss and son-in-law were, she would be there. With this thought, a smile appeared on her little face again. After a moment of absent-mindedness, when she turned back, Li Yi and the others had already walked more than 10 steps. She hugged the small bag in her arms tightly and hurriedly chased after them. Chapter 240. The location of the house was very good. It could be considered a high-class residential area in Qing, and prefectural city. The people around it were either rich or noble. Perhaps it was a coincidence that the princess's house was next door. The courtyard assigned to Li Yi was the largest, but he didn't move in. This place was less than a quarter of an hour away from Rui Square. He was already used to living there, so there was no need to move back and forth. Fong and the others were obviously very satisfied with their new home. After seeing their own house, the trace of melancholy that arose from moving away from Willow Leaf Village quickly disappeared. Although it was still far from the beautiful wives and big house he had imagined, at least he had taken a big step towards his goal. Progress was a good thing, and a bright and beautiful future was waiting for them. They also didn't have to worry about the bandits from the Green Forest coming to cause trouble. Even the most brainless person wouldn't dare to gather so many people at the same time and act wildly in the prefectural city. Without so many people, if they encountered Fong and the others, they would die a horrible death. The gunpowder formula had already been given to Emmingsu. This thing hadn't been seen by anyone, so he would never hand it over. But since things had already come to this point, he could only pretend to be generous and give it away. As for what they would use it for in the future, he didn't know and he didn't want to know. However, this was how things were in the world. Accidents always came so suddenly, and no one knew what would happen in the next moment. The next day, Li Yi, who had been resting at home, was hurriedly summoned by a bailiff. An hour later, he appeared in a village close to the prefectural city. Emmingsu had already arrived before him. At this moment she was standing under a courtyard wall with a thoughtful expression on her face. On the way here the bailiff had already roughly explained the situation to him. This place was called Lu Family Village. They were currently at the home of a landlord in Lu Family Village. This morning the landlord's servant came to the yamen to report that something strange had happened at home. A few bailiffs followed the servant to investigate. It wasn't a big deal, but it wasn't a small one either. Of the 3 cows in Squire Lu's house, 2 had mysteriously died last night. The farming cows were all recorded by the yamen, and if they were slaughtered without permission they would be jailed. There had to be an explanation for the death of 2 cows. If Li Yi hadn't asked for leave he would have brought the bailiffs to investigate this morning. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Li Yi walked in front of Mingzhu and asked with some doubt. If Li Mingzhu had nothing better to do she might have done something about the death of 2 cows. After all, it was in her nature to be a busybody. However, she had just received the gunpowder formula yesterday, so she probably did not have the time to do so. Look, isn't this? She looked at Li Yi and pointed at the collapsed wall. Her tone was a little bewildered. Li Yi looked in the direction of her finger and was slightly stunned. A portion of the courtyard wall that was about 10 feet tall had collapsed, and the base of the wall had caved in, forming a large black pit. Li Yi was slightly startled. He pinched a handful of soil on the ground and sniffed it. He smelled a familiar pungent smell. This time even he was a little surprised. Couldn't be such a coincidence, right? He turned his head and looked at Mingzhu's eyes. He nodded slightly. That's right. Sirs, even if I had the guts I wouldn't dare to kill the cows. I really don't know how they died. A fat man wearing a squire's uniform was crying. His voice was full of tears and snot. Anyone who saw it would be sad and anyone who heard it would be tearful. At this time of course he couldn't keep his composure. If he couldn't explain this matter clearly and the blame was placed on him he would really be finished. Alright, don't cry. What happened last night? Tell me the truth. Li Yi was a little annoyed by this guy's crying, so he waved his hand and said. The problem now was no longer the death of 2 cows. He didn't know who was the genius that actually made the black gunpowder. If this matter couldn't be explained clearly, many people would be out of luck. Hearing the county lieutenant's words, the fat squire immediately stopped crying. Sirs, it was like this. Yesterday I had just married my 3rd concubine. I drank a few more cups with the guests. When I woke up it was already past midnight. I took off my clothes, skipped this part. I was about to. Suddenly I heard an earth-shattering sound coming from outside. I was so scared that my legs went weak. Skip this part as well. When the servants of the mansion went to check, they saw that 2 cows in the cowshed were dead. Even the wall of the courtyard was missing a hole. The fat squire still had some lingering fear when he thought about this matter. He said in horror. Some servants said that when they woke up at night they saw the cowshed on fire. Then a thunderbolt fell from the sky and split the courtyard wall open. The 2 cows were also taken by the heavens. I swear that I will eat vegetarian and pray to Buddha in the future. I will repair the bridge and pave the road. I will do more good things for the villagers. I only hope that the heavens will not send down the divine thunder for the sake of my parents and children. Squire Lu knelt in the courtyard and kept kowtowing. The commotion last night must have scared him half to death. Moreover, he was scared at that awkward moment. Whether he could still have a happy life in the future was also a problem. It's definitely gunpowder. Li Yi turned to look at Mingzhu and whispered. The princess pressed her eyebrows and looked at Li Yi with an incomparably complicated expression. Yesterday he had just said that from the point of view of probability, someone would discover the secret of gunpowder within a day or at most in a few decades. He was right and it was the worst possibility. Why are you looking at me? I didn't do it. Mingzi glanced at him. Of course she knew that it wasn't Li Yi who did it. The city gates were closed at night and no one could come out. Moreover, he was selfless in offering the formula and had no grudges with Squire Lu. There was no need for him to do such a thing. The plan now was to find the person who knew the formula as soon as possible. If someone with ulterior motives used it, the consequences would be unthinkable. Think carefully. Who do you have grudges with? Don't overlook any of them. Mingzi looked at Squire Lu and asked with a frown. No. I have always been well behaved and kind. I don't have any enemies. Squire Lu shook his head with a face full of doubt. So you admit that the death of the 2 cows was your fault? The princess's expression became a little unfriendly. Squire Zhang from the neighboring village had a quarrel with me last year over the ownership of a piece of land. I'm afraid he still holds a grudge. Lu ergo, he is a farmer in the village and has always had a grudge with me. To tell you the truth, a few days ago he saw me having an affair with the cripple's wife from the Lu family next door. Although I paid him some money, I feel that the way he looks at me these days is very strange. After being glanced at by Emmingsu, Squire Lu's amnesia immediately recovered and he started to talk non-stop. Her people had already recorded everything. After a while, Squire Lu said with a bitter face, "Your Excellencies, other than these, I really can't remember anything else." The person in charge of the recording twitched his mouth. There were already more than 20 names written on the paper. Master, third madam hasn't eaten since yesterday. Just now when the cook brought the food over, she still didn't eat. No matter how we tried to persuade her, it was useless. A round-faced girl ran in from outside the door and said as she ran. When she saw the people in official uniforms in the room, she was immediately stunned. In his heart, Li Yi felt that this third madam was also a person with a story. However, in this era such things were common. Parents' orders and the words of a matchmaker were everything. The probability of a woman marrying a Rui Langjun was low. It was negligible. Squire Lu laughed dryly and said, "Your Excellencies, please don't laugh at me. This third madam has been in the brothel for a long time. She just came to the mansion yesterday, so she might not be used to it yet. I will slowly train her in the future." Brothel? Li Yi and Emmingsu looked over at the same time. Chapter 241. Yes. Speaking of this third madam, Lu Yuanwei couldn't help but smile. He even forgot about the possibility of a lawsuit. I'm not bragging, but although there are many beautiful women in the brothel, Yun Yang is one of the best. Who knows how many people want her as a concubine? If it wasn't for the fact that her father still owes me a lot of rent, this matter wouldn't be easy. Where is the brothel you mentioned? Before Lu Yuanwei could finish, he was interrupted by Li Yi. Lu Yuanwei pointed in a direction and said, "It's not far. It's just under the eastern city wall. The 2 lords will see it when they reach the city gate." Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Call your third madam over." This. Lu Yuanwei's face showed hesitation. He had just married the third madam last night and hadn't had time to consummate their marriage. Looking at this lord's expression, could it be that he wanted to? Lu Yuanwei felt regret. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have bragged so much. Now the concubine he married might fly away. Go call the third madam over. He glared at the girl. If she hadn't barged in, how would this be happening? Lu Yuanwei didn't dare to refuse. After all, his lawsuit hadn't come to an end yet. If he offended the lord in front of him, he wouldn't have a good time. The girl hurriedly ran out. After a while, she came back with a young woman. The woman had delicate features, but her face was pale, revealing a delicate and pitiful posture. In Li Yi's eyes, her appearance was average. Although the princess beside him was wearing neutral clothing, her radiance far outshone the third madam. However, Lu Yuanwei was at least 30 years old. It was a waste for such a girl who looked at most 16 to be his concubine. The 2 lords ask you a few questions. You must answer truthfully or see how I'll deal with you. Lu Yuanwei looked at the woman and said with a straight face, "You shut up." Emmingsu looked at Lu Yuanwei indifferently. The other party immediately smiled and tactfully closed his mouth. "Do you know what happened here last night?" Emmingsu looked at her and asked casually. As soon as she finished speaking, Li Yi clearly saw a trace of panic on the woman's face. Although she quickly recovered, it was obviously impossible to escape the princess' eyes. "You go out first." Emmingsu pointed at Lu Yuanwei and said. Lu Yuanwei actually didn't want to go out, but the man who had just recorded put his hand on his shoulder. After a little bit of force, he obediently followed the man. The others also retreated to the door, not letting anyone near. Lu Yuanwei has already left. "You can speak." Emmingsu looked at her and said, "Milords, you might be mistaken. I really don't know anything." The woman's face suddenly turned pale, but she still gritted her teeth and said. Li Yi smiled and said, "I know you don't want to be Lu Yuanwei's concubine. If we can find you, we can naturally find the person from last night. If you can tell us the truth now. Li Yi pointed at Mingzu and said, this milord can help you and save you from here. You won't have to be Lu Yuanwai's concubine anymore. If there is someone you want to marry, it is not impossible for the government to be a matchmaker for you. When the woman heard the first half of Li Yi's words, a nervous expression appeared on her face. After listening to him finish, her eyes suddenly showed some hope and her expression changed. After a moment she bit her lower lip as if she had made a decision. She raised her head to look at Li Yi and asked, "Milord, is what you said true?" Li Yi only smiled at her and didn't speak again. The woman's face showed hesitation again. When her eyes gradually became determined, she suddenly knelt down with a put-ong sound. "I am willing to speak. I only ask that milord be lenient with him. Leave 2 people behind to watch him. The rest of you follow me." 2 people walked out of the room. Mingzi gave the order and strode out. Li Yi looked at Lu Yuanwai and unhurriedly followed. The status of the tiled houses and brothels in this world was similar to the entertainment squares and cinemas of the future. Of course, there were more services here. Most of them were rap and performing arts. All kinds of acrobatics were rarely seen in the future. These places were not rare here. Some of the more remote counties also had the existence of tiled houses, just on a smaller scale. The Jianghu artists gathered in the tile-roofed shop to show off their skills. They had different styles and styles. They set up different arenas in the tile-roofed shop, forming small circles. They used railings, ropes, and curtains to separate them from each other. Each circle was a brothel. The tiled houses outside the city were simpler and more chaotic than the ones in the city. The tiled houses formed their own Jianghu. Although it was difficult to manage because of the crowd, the government didn't like such places. However, places like the tiled houses and brothels were very popular among the people. Regardless of whether it was the commoners or the martial artists, they all liked to watch the bustle in such places. After Li Yi and Mingzu entered the tiled house, they followed the woman's instructions and walked towards the largest brothel. Because it was daytime, there weren't many people in the brothel. When they lifted the curtain and walked in, they immediately smelled a slightly pungent smell. They saw fireworks on the stage. A few masked men with disheveled hair were jumping on the stage. Seemed like they were doing a strange dance. The sound of gongs could be heard everywhere. It was very lively. It should be here. They walked straight to the back of the stage. Spectators were not allowed to enter the backstage. A few people in the brothel wanted to stop them but were blocked by the men. Behind the curtain, a young man was using a fan to fan the smoke from the burning gunpowder to the front of the stage. He heard footsteps behind him. When he turned around, he saw a few strangers walking towards him. Xin Liang. The young man who was the leader asked tentatively. "You are?" The young man stood up with some doubts. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, 2 men walked over and pressed on his shoulders. The young man was just an ordinary Jianghu artist. After he brought her back, he didn't spend much effort and confessed everything in detail. The story was actually very cliché. There were 2 young men and women of lowly status who liked each other. They couldn't get married in the end. Lu Yuanwai, as the biggest villain in the story, used his status as the landlord to half-force the woman to be his concubine. As the lover, of course, the man wouldn't let it go. However, due to his status, he had no other way. He could only blow up the wall of Lu Yuanwai's house on the night of their wedding and set off a free firework to send his blessings to Lu Yuanwai. He didn't expect that he didn't choose the right place to blow it up. It happened to be next to the cowshed. The 2 cows didn't die from the explosion. They were scared to death by the sudden loud noise. Fortunately, Xin Liang didn't have the idea of mixing iron pieces with the gunpowder. Otherwise, the other cow wouldn't have survived. As for the gunpowder formula, it wasn't difficult to explain. The first 3 generations of the Xin family were all performers in pyrotechnics. They relied on this unique skill to make a living in the brothel, dealing with these things all day long. In the end, they were able to figure out some things after a few decades. Although it hadn't reached the most accurate proportion of the later generations, and there were many shortcomings in the craftsmanship, it was more than enough to blow up the wall. Xin Liang's father was killed by this kind of thing that was accidentally discovered. As the sole heir of the Xin family, Xin Liang had always treated it as a secret that could not be passed on. This time Lu Yuanwai forced him into a corner. After doing such a thing in the dark, he hurriedly fled home. He didn't expect that after only half a day the officials would come to the door. If Li Yi didn't guess wrong, he wouldn't be able to see Shen Liang and Yun Yang in the brothel in the future. And Lu Yuanwai's next wife would be his third concubine. Of course, with Her Royal Highness's style of doing things, the two of them would probably have a better life in the future. Although there would be a lack of personal freedom, they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. Compared to their previous life, this was already a very happy ending. It wasn't a coincidence that the other party could make a simple version of the bomb. If there was one, there would be a second and a third. Perhaps somewhere, someone had already discovered the mystery of the gunpowder. But this should be what Her Royal Highness needed to worry about. Looking at Her Royal Highness, who obviously had something on her mind, Li Yi's footsteps slightly quickened. He walked over and patted her shoulder. He said with a smile, "Why don't we discuss one more thing? You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."